Mist clings to the highland ridges of West Java like the breath of forgotten gods. In the pre-dawn darkness, shadows pool between volcanic peaks that have watched over this land for millions of years. The air carries the scent of wet earth and ancient rain, while somewhere in the distance, a lone bird calls across the valley, its voice echoing against stone terraces that shouldn't exist. This is Gunung Padang. To the casual observer, it appears as nothing more than a forested hill rising gently from the Indonesian countryside. Farmers tend their fields in its shadow. Children play among its lower slopes. Life continues here as it has for generations, unmarked by the weight of what may lie beneath. But look closer. Notice how the hillside forms perfect terraces, each level carved with mathematical precision. See how massive stone columns emerge from the earth at impossible angles, their surfaces bearing marks that speak of deliberate human hands. Feel the strange resonance that seems to pulse from deep within the hill itself, as if something vast and ancient stirs in its sleep. The locals have always known this place was different. Their grandparents spoke in hushed tones of the old ones who built with sound and starlight. Their children still avoid certain paths after sunset, drawn by instincts older than memory. But what if these whispered stories contain fragments of truth? What if this modest hill conceals something that could shatter everything we believe about human history? Imagine standing here 28,000 years ago, when the world was locked in ice and sea levels lay hundreds of feet lower than today. Picture a landscape where vast plains stretched across what is now the Java Sea, connecting Indonesia to mainland Asia in one continuous landmass. The climate was harsh, unforgiving. Most of our ancestors struggled merely to survive, hunting mammoth across frozen steppes and sheltering in caves against the endless winter. Yet here, in this remote corner of an ancient world, someone was building. Not crude shelters or simple burial mounds, but something magnificent. Something that would endure long after their civilization vanished into the mists of prehistory. Layer by layer, stone by stone, they created a monument that would outlast empires, outlast ice ages, outlast the very memory of their existence. The first archaeologists to study Gunung Padang dismissed it as a natural formation with some minor human modifications from much later periods. The official dating placed any human activity here at perhaps 2,000 years old, safely within the boundaries of accepted history. But as modern technology began to peer beneath the surface, a different story emerged. Ground-penetrating radar revealed hidden chambers. Carbon dating suggested impossible ages. Suddenly, this quiet hill in Java had become the center of one of archaeology's most contentious debates. What if everything we've been taught about the dawn of civilization is wrong? What if cities rose and fell when mainstream history tells us humans were barely capable of making fire? What if the builders of Gunung Padang possessed knowledge and capabilities that we have only recently begun to rediscover? The implications stretch far beyond archaeology. If a pyramid truly stands here, constructed 28,000 years ago, then human civilization is far older and more sophisticated than we ever dared imagine. It would mean that advanced cultures flourished during the depths of the Ice Age, that maritime civilizations crossed oceans when we believed humans were confined to small tribal bands, and that cataclysmic events have repeatedly reset human progress, erasing entire chapters from our story. Standing here in the misty dawn, watching the sun rise over terraces that may predate Stonehenge by 20 millennia, one can almost hear the echo of ancient voices carried on the wind. They speak of a world before the flood, before the ice, before the great forgetting that left us believing we were the first to reach for the stars. The hill keeps its secrets well, but for those willing to listen, to look beyond the accepted narratives and peer into the shadows of deep time, Gunung Padang offers something profound, a glimpse of who we might have been long before we became who we are today. The history books paint a clear picture of human progress, one that has shaped our understanding for generations. Civilization, we are told, began around 6,000 years ago in the fertile crescents of Mesopotamia, where the first cities emerged from agricultural abundance. The Sumerians developed writing, the wheel, and complex irrigation systems. Egypt followed with its magnificent pyramids and hieroglyphs. The Indus Valley contributed sophisticated urban planning and advanced mathematics. This narrative unfolds with comfortable logic. Hunter-gatherers learned to farm. Farming led to surplus food. Surplus food allowed specialization. Specialists created technology. Technology enabled larger populations. Larger populations built cities. Cities became civilizations. The progression seems inevitable, natural, and thoroughly documented. Archaeological evidence supports this timeline with reassuring consistency. Pottery fragments tell stories of gradual technological advancement. Tool technologies show clear evolutionary progressions, from stone to bronze to iron. Settlement patterns reveal the slow expansion of agricultural communities. Everything fits together like pieces of a vast, carefully assembled puzzle. Before this agricultural revolution, mainstream science tells us humans lived as nomadic bands for hundreds of thousands of years. They followed game animals across vast continents, developed sophisticated hunting strategies, and created remarkable cave paintings. But they built nothing permanent, nothing monumental, nothing that would suggest the organizational capacity for large-scale construction projects. The reasoning appears sound. Complex architecture requires not just technical knowledge, but massive coordinated labor forces. Such projects demand agricultural surplus to feed non-productive workers, administrative systems to organize the effort, and social hierarchies capable of maintaining long-term construction programs. Hunter-gatherer societies, however sophisticated their survival skills, simply lack these preconditions for monumental building. During the last glacial maxima, roughly 26,000 to 19,000 years ago, ice sheets covered much of North America and Northern Europe. Sea levels dropped by over 400 feet as water locked in glaciers. The climate was harsh, resources scarce, and human populations small and scattered. Most of our ancestors lived in conditions of constant survival pressure. Their entire existence focused on finding food, shelter, and safety from both predators and the elements. Archaeological sites from this period confirm this picture. Tool assemblages remain relatively simple. Settlements show temporary occupation patterns. Burial practices suggest small, mobile groups rather than complex societies. The famous cave paintings of Lascaux and Altamira, magnificent as they are, represent artistic achievement within the context of hunting cultures, not evidence of urban civilization. Even the most optimistic estimates place the global human population during the Ice Age at perhaps a few million individuals, scattered across vast continents in small, often isolated groups. The logistics of organizing thousands of workers for a major construction project would have been virtually impossible under such conditions. Food storage technology was limited. Communication across distances remained primitive. Leadership structures, while present, operated on scales measured in dozens rather than thousands of individuals. The transition to agriculture marks such a profound shift in human capability that historians refer to it as the Neolithic Revolution. Within just a few thousand years of learning to domesticate plants and animals, human societies transformed completely. Population densities increased dramatically. Permanent settlements replaced nomadic camps. Craft specialization emerged as farmers could support non-food producing artisans. Writing systems developed to track increasingly complex economic and administrative needs. This agricultural foundation made possible the great monuments we associate with early civilization. The Egyptian pyramids required not just engineering knowledge, but also the ability to feed and house thousands of workers for decades. Mesopotamian ziggurats represented not merely architectural ambition, but the organizational capacity of complex city-states. Stonehenge, built over many centuries, reflected the accumulated wealth and coordinated efforts of numerous agricultural communities. The contrast with earlier periods seems stark and definitive. Pre-agricultural sites show sophisticated adaptation to natural environments, but no evidence of landscape modification on the scale required for monumental architecture. Post-agricultural sites reveal humanity's growing ability to reshape the environment according to conscious design. This orthodox timeline has governed archaeological interpretation for over a century, and for good reason. It explains the available evidence with remarkable consistency. It provides a framework for understanding human development that aligns with what we know about social organization, technology transfer, and economic systems. It offers a coherent narrative of progress that connects our earliest ancestors to our modern civilization. Yet as the mist continues to swirl around Gunung Padang, questions begin to emerge. What happens when evidence appears that doesn't fit this comfortable framework? How do we respond when the boundaries of the possible begin to shift? The official story of human beginnings may be about to encounter its greatest challenge, hidden beneath the deceptive simplicity of an Indonesian hill.
From the air, Gunung Padang appears deceptively ordinary, a modest rise in the landscape, clothed in tropical vegetation and crowned with what seem to be natural rock outcroppings. But the helicopter's shadow passes over something far more intriguing than first glances suggest. The hill's profile reveals a curious symmetry, its slopes rising in distinct terraces that catch the morning light at precise angles. Local farmers have worked these slopes for generations, their ancestors having cultivated these terraces long before anyone questioned their origin. To them, the stone columns and carefully arranged megalithic structures scattered across 5 distinct levels were simply part of the landscape. Remarkable, perhaps, but no more mysterious than any other ancestral monument. Their oral traditions spoke of the old builders, but such stories belonged to the realm of legend rather than history. The stones themselves tell a different tale to those who know how to read their language. Massive basalt columns, some weighing several tons, stand in formations that seem to follow an underlying geometric pattern. These are not roughly hewn boulders tumbled randomly down a hillside, but carefully shaped and positioned megalithic elements. Their surfaces bear tool marks, evidence of deliberate modification by human hands working with sophisticated knowledge of stone-cutting techniques. Each terrace level presents its own mysteries. The first terrace, closest to the hill's base, contains the most accessible and therefore most studied structures. Here, archaeologists have documented stone arrangements that appear to follow astronomical alignments, their angles carefully calculated to mark significant celestial events. The stonework shows evidence of advanced joinery techniques, with precisely fitted joints that have survived millennia of seismic activity in this geologically active region. As one climbs higher, the structures become more enigmatic. The second and third terraces reveal stone configurations that serve no obvious practical purpose, yet follow clear organizational principles. Polygonal stones fit together with mathematical precision, creating platforms and pathways that seem to flow organically across the hillside, while maintaining strict geometric relationships. The fourth terrace presents perhaps the most intriguing features. Here, massive stone columns emerge from the earth at angles that suggest they may be only the visible portions of much larger buried structures. Ground-penetrating radar has detected extensive anomalies. Beneath this level, geometric patterns that extend deep into the hill's interior, suggesting the existence of hidden chambers and passages. The uppermost terrace, the fifth level, crowns the hill with what appears to be the most sacred area. Local traditions maintain that this summit has always been a place of power, where village elders would come to commune with ancestral spirits. The stone arrangements here are more subtle but no less mysterious, consisting of carefully positioned megaliths that create sightlines across the surrounding landscape toward distant peaks and valleys. What strikes researchers most forcefully about Gunung Padang is its integration with the natural environment. Unlike many ancient monuments that impose geometric order upon the landscape, this site seems to grow organically from the hill itself. The builders appeared to work with the underlying topography rather than against it, creating something that feels both artificial and natural simultaneously. The acoustic properties of the site add another layer of mystery. Many of the stone columns, when struck, produce distinct musical tones, not the random sounds one might expect from natural rock formations, but clear, resonant notes that seem almost deliberately tuned. Some researchers have documented complex harmonic relationships between different groups of stones, suggesting that the entire site might have functioned as a kind of massive stone instrument. Local Sundanese legends speak of this place as Gunung Padang, the mountain of enlightenment. The stories, passed down through generations of oral tradition, describe it as a place where the ancestors possessed powers beyond current human understanding. They tell of builders who could move massive stones through the application of sound and light, who understood the language of the earth and the movements of the stars. These legends describe the original builders as the Atlanteans or similar advanced beings who possessed technology that seemed magical to later generations. The stories speak of crystal devices that could levitate stone blocks, of architects who worked in harmony with natural forces, and of a time when the distinction between science and spirituality did not exist. Archaeological surveys have revealed that Gunung Padang's structures extend far beyond what is visible on the surface. Subsurface investigations suggest a complex of chambers and passages that may honeycomb the entire hill. These hidden spaces appear to be deliberately constructed rather than natural cave systems, with regularly spaced supports and carefully engineered drainage systems. The engineering implications are staggering. If the subsurface structures are indeed artificial, their construction would have required not just advanced planning and coordination, but also sophisticated understanding of geology, hydrology, and structural engineering. The builders would have needed to account for the region's frequent seismic activity, creating structures capable of surviving earthquakes that would destroy conventional buildings. Water management systems throughout the site suggest another level of technological sophistication. Channels carved into stone direct rainfall and groundwater through carefully planned routes that prevent erosion while maintaining the stability of the terraced structures. These waterworks appear to be integral to the site's design rather than later additions, indicating that the original builders understood and planned for the long-term maintenance of their creation. As the sun sets over Gunung Padang, casting long shadows across its mysterious terraces, one begins to understand why this place has captured the imagination of researchers willing to challenge conventional archaeological wisdom. Here, carved into volcanic stone and integrated seamlessly with the natural landscape, lies evidence that the story of human civilization may be far more complex and ancient than we have dared to imagine.
Danny Hillman Nadawijah never intended to challenge the foundations of archaeological orthodoxy. As a senior geologist at the Indonesian Institute of Sciences, his reputation was built on solid research and careful methodology. His expertise lay in the complex geological processes that shaped the Indonesian archipelago, not in ancient mysteries or controversial theories about lost civilizations. Yet Gunung Padang would transform him from a respected earth scientist into one of archaeology's most contentious figures. The story began in 2010, when Nadawijah was invited to conduct geological surveys of what was then considered a minor archaeological site. The invitation came from Ali Akbar, a government archaeologist who suspected there might be more to Gunung Padang than the official designation as a late prehistoric settlement. The initial mission seemed straightforward. Use modern geological techniques to better understand the site's formation and determine which features were natural and which showed evidence of human modification. Nadawijah assembled a team of specialists, bringing together expertise in geology, geophysics, and archaeological science. Their toolkit included ground-penetrating radar, electrical resistivity tomography, and seismic surveys, technologies capable of seeing deep beneath the Earth's surface without the destructive impact of traditional excavation. What they expected to find was perhaps some evidence of stone arrangement by early Indonesian cultures, possibly dating back a few thousand years. The first anomalies appeared almost immediately. Ground-penetrating radar revealed geometric patterns extending far beneath the visible surface structures. These subsurface features showed the regular, artificial patterns, characteristic of human construction, rather than the random formations typical of natural geological processes. More puzzling still, the buried structures appeared to be far more extensive than anything visible on the surface, suggesting that the terraces were merely the uppermost levels of a much larger complex. As the team expanded their survey grid, the scope of the anomalies became increasingly dramatic. Electrical resistivity measurements indicated the presence of chambers and voids within the hill's interior, spaces that appeared to be deliberately constructed rather than natural caves. Seismic surveys suggested that artificial structures might extend to depths of over 30 meters, far deeper than any known prehistoric construction in the region. But it was the dating evidence that would prove most controversial. Core samples taken from various depths within the hill began yielding radiocarbon dates that challenged everything the team thought they knew about the site's age. Organic materials found within the artificial structures consistently dated far older than expected, not hundreds or even thousands of years, but dates reaching back into the depths of the Ice Age. The deepest samples proved most shocking of all. Carbon-14 analysis of organic materials recovered from the lowest levels of construction suggested ages approaching 28,000 years, a time when mainstream archaeology insisted humans were incapable of monumental architecture. The implications were staggering. If these dates were accurate, Gunung Padang predated the Egyptian pyramids by over 20 millennia. Nadawijah's training as a geologist provided a different perspective on these findings than might have emerged from traditional archaeological investigation, where archaeologists might focus on artifacts and cultural sequences. His earth science background led him to examine the site as an integrated geological and engineering system. The precision of the construction, the sophisticated understanding of drainage and structural stability, the complex acoustic properties, all suggested builders with advanced technical knowledge. The geological context added weight to the controversial dating. The volcanic activity that created the basalt columns used in construction could be dated independently through radiometric analysis of the rock itself. These dates confirmed that the stone materials were available during the proposed construction period. More importantly, the way these natural columns had been modified and arranged showed clear evidence of human engineering during the time frame suggested by the carbon dates. As news of the team's findings began to circulate within Indonesian scientific circles, the response was swift and polarized. Government officials, eager to promote what could be the world's oldest pyramid, embraced the research enthusiastically. International archaeological community, however, reacted with deep skepticism that often bordered on hostility. The idea of Ice Age pyramid builders contradicted fundamental assumptions about human cultural development. Nadawijaya found himself defending not just his data, but his scientific reputation. Critics questioned his methodologies, his interpretations, and even his motivations. Some suggested that as a geologist, rather than a trained archaeologist, he lacked the expertise to properly interpret cultural evidence. Others hinted at nationalist bias, suggesting that Indonesian scientists might be motivated to discover ancient glories that enhanced their nation's prehistoric prestige. The controversy deepened when international teams arrived to conduct independent assessments. Some researchers confirmed aspects of Nadawijaya's findings, particularly the evidence for extensive subsurface structures and sophisticated engineering. Others challenged the dating methodologies or offered alternative explanations for the anomalous evidence. The scientific debate became increasingly heated, with academic reputations and institutional funding at stake. Despite the controversy, Nadawijaya and his team continued their investigations. They refined their methodologies, expanded their survey areas, and collaborated with international researchers, willing to approach the evidence with open minds rather than predetermined conclusions. Each season of research added new pieces to an increasingly complex puzzle. The acoustic studies proved particularly intriguing. Detailed analysis revealed that the stone structures possessed resonant frequencies that created complex harmonic patterns when activated by percussion or even wind. The entire site appeared to function as an enormous stone instrument, capable of producing sounds that could be heard across considerable distances. Such sophisticated acoustic engineering suggested not just advanced technical knowledge, but also cultural practices involving sound and music. Three-dimensional modeling of the subsurface structures revealed an even more remarkable picture. The buried chambers and passages appeared to follow complex geometric relationships, with proportions that reflected sophisticated mathematical understanding. The layout suggested not random construction, but careful planning according to underlying design principles that remained consistent throughout the site's multiple building phases. As Nadawijaya stood on the summit of Gunung Padang, watching the sun set over terraces that his research suggested might be humanity's oldest monumental architecture, he contemplated the journey that had brought him to this point. A simple geological survey had evolved into a fundamental challenge to archaeological orthodoxy. The data was clear, the methodology sound, but the implications remained almost too extraordinary to accept. The hill kept revealing new secrets, each discovery adding complexity to an already revolutionary picture. Whether the academic world was ready to accept these revelations remained an open question, but the evidence continued to accumulate with each passing season of research. 28,000 years. The number hangs in the air like a discordant note, disturbing the comfortable harmony of established archaeological chronology. To understand why this date creates such profound controversy, one must appreciate how completely it shatters the carefully constructed timeline that has governed our understanding. of human development for over a century. In the world of mainstream archaeology, 28,000 years ago places us firmly within the Upper Paleolithic period, a time when human culture was undergoing remarkable development, but remained fundamentally limited by the constraints of hunter-gatherer existence. The Lascaux cave paintings were still 8,000 years in the future. Agriculture wouldn't emerge for another 20 millennia. Writing systems lay 23,000 years beyond the horizon. This was the height of the last glacial maximum, when ice sheets extended across much of the northern continents and global sea levels dropped by hundreds of feet. The climate was harsh, resources scarce, and human populations existed as small, scattered bands struggling against environmental pressures that would have made survival itself a constant challenge. The entire global human population likely numbered fewer than 1 million individuals, spread thinly across vast continents. Traditional archaeological evidence from this period paints a clear picture of human capabilities and limitations. Tool technologies, while sophisticated within their context, remained focused on immediate survival needs. Weapons for hunting, implements for food processing, and portable shelter materials dominated material culture. Nothing in the archaeological record suggested the organizational capacity, technical knowledge, or labor surplus required for monumental architecture. The construction of something like Gunung Padang, if the controversial dating is accurate, would have required capabilities that traditional archaeology insists simply didn't exist. Moving multi-ton stone blocks across considerable distances would have demanded not just human labor, but sophisticated engineering knowledge of leverage, transportation, and construction techniques. The precision of the stonework suggests standardized measurement systems and quality control processes that imply complex social organization. Perhaps more challenging still, such a project would have required the ability to feed and coordinate large numbers of non-productive workers over extended periods. Hunter-gatherer societies, by their very nature, operate with minimal food surplus. Every able-bodied individual typically contributes directly to subsistence activities. The diversion of hundreds or thousands of people to construction work would have been economically impossible without agricultural food production systems. The mathematical sophistication apparent in Gunung Padang's astronomical alignments and acoustic properties adds another layer of difficulty to the traditional timeline. Such knowledge requires not just individual genius, but cultural systems capable of preserving and transmitting complex information across generations. Written records, or at minimum highly structured oral traditions maintained by specialist priest astronomers, would seem necessary for projects of such precision. Defenders of orthodox chronology point to the complete absence of transitional evidence. If humans were capable of monumental architecture 28,000 years ago, where are the simpler precedents? Where are the failed experiments, the practice structures, the technological development sequences that should precede such sophisticated achievement? The archaeological record shows no gradual progression toward monumentality during the Ice Age, only the sudden appearance of an impossible anomaly. The implications extend far beyond a single controversial site. If Gunung Padang truly dates to 28,000 years ago, it suggests that human civilization developed along radically different trajectories than currently believed. Advanced cultures might have risen and fallen repeatedly throughout prehistory, leaving only scattered traces for us to discover. Our entire understanding of human progress as a steady, linear advancement from simple to complex would require fundamental revision. Climate data from the proposed construction period adds complexity to both sides of the debate. While the last glacial maximum created harsh conditions across much of the globe, certain equatorial regions remained relatively stable and habitable. The Indonesian archipelago, with its maritime climate and volcanic soils, might have provided conditions conducive to more complex societies than existed elsewhere during this period. Some researchers propose that rapid climate changes during the Ice Age could have driven accelerated cultural development. Environmental pressures might have forced human populations to develop more sophisticated organizational structures, more advanced technologies, and more complex knowledge systems simply to survive. In this view, adversity could have catalyzed innovation rather than preventing it. The controversy has split the archaeological community into increasingly polarized camps. Traditionalists maintain that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the Gunung Padang findings, however intriguing, don't meet the standards necessary to overturn established chronology. They argue for more conservative interpretations of the data, suggesting that natural processes or later modifications might account for the anomalous evidence. Alternative researchers, however, see Gunung Padang as confirmation of theories they've long advocated. They point to other sites around the world that also challenge conventional timelines. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, the Sphinx in Egypt, underwater structures off various coastlines, as evidence of a pattern of much greater antiquity for human civilization than mainstream archaeology acknowledges. The debate has taken on characteristics that extend beyond purely scientific disagreement. Academic careers, institutional funding, and professional reputations hang in the balance. The peer review process, normally a mechanism for ensuring scientific quality, has become a battleground where methodological standards clash with paradigmatic assumptions. Meanwhile, the evidence from Gunung Padang continues to accumulate. Each new season of research adds data points that must be explained, regardless of their implications for established chronology. Carbon dates remain consistent across multiple laboratories and methodologies. Geological evidence supports the artificial nature of the subsurface structures. Acoustic measurements confirm the sophisticated engineering of the stone arrangements. As researchers on both sides of the controversy examine the same evidence through different interpretive lenses, the fundamental question becomes not just whether Gunung Padang is 28,000 years old, but whether our current understanding of human development is comprehensive enough to accommodate such possibilities. The clash of timelines may ultimately force a reckoning with assumptions that have guided archaeological interpretation for generations. The hill itself remains unchanged by these academic debates, its stone terraces rising toward the sky with the same mysterious precision, whether they were built 2,000 or 28,000 years ago. But for those seeking to understand humanity's deep past, Gunung Padang has become a pivotal battleground where the boundaries between possible and impossible continue to shift with each new discovery. Long before Gunung Padang emerged as a controversial archaeological site, the human imagination had been haunted by stories of lost civilizations, golden ages when knowledge flourished and great cities rose from the earth, only to vanish beneath the waves of time and catastrophe. No tale has captured this longing more powerfully than Plato's account of Atlantis, that magnificent island empire that supposedly sank beneath the Atlantic Ocean 9,000 years before his own era. For more than 2 millennia, Atlantis has remained suspended between history and myth, tantalizing generations of scholars, explorers, and dreamers. Plato presented it as a philosophical allegory, a perfect society that fell to hubris and divine judgment. Yet the specificity of his details, the concentric rings of land and water, the advanced metallurgy, the sophisticated engineering works, suggested something more than mere fiction. The question has always been whether Plato drew his inspiration from folk memories of real places and real peoples. The dating of Gunung Padang adds a fascinating new dimension to this ancient mystery. If the Indonesian site truly dates to 28,000 years ago, it places human monumental architecture not merely before the rise of known civilizations, but potentially before the great cataclysms that mark the end of the last ice age. This timing aligns remarkably well with alternative interpretations of Plato's oceanology that account for possible errors in ancient calendar systems or multiple cultural catastrophes. Alternative researchers have long argued that Plato's Atlantis might represent a corrupted memory of multiple advanced civilizations that flourished, during the Ice Age and were subsequently destroyed by the massive environmental changes that marked its end. The Younger Dryas period, a sudden return to glacial conditions between 12,900 and 11,700 years ago, brought precisely the kind of rapid, catastrophic climate change that could have wiped advanced maritime civilizations from the historical record. Gunung Padang's sophisticated engineering begins to make sense within this broader context. If advanced cultures existed during the Ice Age, they would have developed in a world dramatically different from our own. Sea levels hundreds of feet lower would have created vast continental shelves where advanced civilizations might have flourished. The Indonesian archipelago would have been largely connected as a single landmass called Sundaland, providing ample territory for complex societies to develop. The acoustic properties of Gunung Padang particularly intrigue researchers looking for connections to Atlantean legends. Plato described Atlantean technology in terms that sound almost magical to modern ears. Their ability to work with crystal technologies, their understanding of harmonic principles, their integration of natural and artificial forces. The stone arrangements of Gunung Padang, with their carefully tuned resonant frequencies and complex acoustic relationships, suggest just such integration of engineering with natural harmonics. Some researchers propose that sites like Gunung Padang might represent the technological achievements of Atlantean survivors, refugees from a maritime civilization destroyed by rising seas and climate catastrophe, who carried their advanced knowledge to highland areas where it could survive the great changes. The precision of the astronomical alignments, the sophisticated understanding of geology and hydrology, the advanced acoustic engineering all point to knowledge systems far more complex than traditional archaeology attributes to Ice Age peoples. The global distribution of megalithic sites adds weight to this interpretation. From Göbekli Tepe in Turkey to Sacsayhuaman in Peru, from Newgrange in Ireland to Nan Madol in Micronesia, monumental architecture appears around the world with sophisticated engineering that challenges conventional chronologies. Rather than representing isolated achievements by separate cultures, these sites might reflect a connected network of knowledge and technology dispersed by maritime peoples. During the final phases of the Ice Age, local Indonesian legends provide intriguing parallels to Atlantean themes. Sundanese oral traditions speak of the kingdom of Pajajaran, a golden age civilization that possessed advanced knowledge and mysterious technologies before being destroyed by natural catastrophes. These stories describe rulers who could command the forces of nature, architects who built with sound and light, and a time when the boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds remained permeable. The legend of Lemuria, another lost continent supposedly located in the Indian Ocean, adds additional resonance to the Gunung Padang mystery. Colonial-era scholars proposed Lemuria as a bridge between the advanced civilizations of Asia and the Pacific, a now-submerged landmass that might have hosted sophisticated cultures during periods when sea levels were much lower. Modern geological understanding has discredited the literal existence of Lemuria, but the concept of advanced Ice Age civilizations on now-submerged continental shelves remains scientifically plausible. Ancient maps add another layer of mystery to these connections. The Piri Reis map of 1513 appears to show Antarctica without ice cover, suggesting knowledge of that continent's coastline from a time when it was not frozen. The Orontius Phineas map of 1532 depicts Antarctica with remarkable accuracy for an era when the continent was supposedly unknown. If such maps preserve information from much earlier periods, they might represent the cartographic legacy of advanced maritime civilizations that explored the world when geography itself was dramatically different. Edgar Cayce, the famous American psychic, provided detailed descriptions of Atlantean technology that bear striking resemblances to features observed at Gunung Padang. He spoke of crystal-based technologies that could manipulate gravitational forces, of architectural principles based on harmonic resonance, of civilizations that integrated scientific and spiritual knowledge in ways that modern culture has forgotten. While such sources lie outside conventional academic evidence, they reflect persistent cultural memories that might preserve fragments of actual historical experience. The dispersal patterns suggested by genetic and linguistic research add scientific support to the possibility of advanced Ice Age migrations. Modern human populations show evidence of complex movement patterns during the final phases of the Ice Age, with sophisticated seafaring capabilities that could have supported advanced maritime civilizations. The rapid spread of certain technological innovations across vast oceanic distances suggests communication networks far more extensive than traditionally assumed. Catastrophism, once dismissed by geological orthodoxy, has gained new respectability as evidence accumulates for the dramatic environmental changes that marked the end of the Ice Age. Massive flooding events, rapid sea level changes, and climate instabilities could have destroyed entire civilizations within decades or centuries, leaving only scattered remnants for later peoples to discover and mythologize. As the sun sets over Gunung Padang, casting shadows across terraces that may represent humanity's oldest monumental achievement, one can almost hear the echoes of those ancient voices that first told stories of golden ages and lost worlds. Whether those stories preserve actual historical memories or simply reflect universal human longing for a more perfect past, sites like Gunung Padang force us to confront the possibility that our ancestors achieved far more than we have dared to imagine. The hill stands as a bridge between legend and evidence, between the comfortable certainties of established chronology and the unsettling possibilities that emerge when we allow the stones themselves to tell their story. In the villages that nestle around Gunung Padang's base, stories flow like mountain streams, carrying the accumulated wisdom of generations across the landscape of memory. These are not the carefully documented histories of academic scholarship, but something older and perhaps more truthful, the living voices of peoples whose ancestors witnessed events that official history has forgotten or dismissed as impossible. The Sundanese people have inhabited this region for millennia, their culture shaped by the rhythms of volcanic mountains and monsoon seasons, their worldview reflecting intimate knowledge of a landscape that modern eyes see only as scenic countryside. But their oral traditions preserve memories of a time when this land was different, when the people who walked these hills possessed capabilities that seem magical to contemporary understanding. According to the most persistent legends, Gunung Padang was built by the ancestors during a golden age when the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds remained permeable. These were not ordinary humans as we understand them today, but beings who had mastered the fundamental forces that govern matter and energy. They could move massive stones not through brute physical labor, but through the application of sound frequencies that temporarily altered the stone's gravitational properties. The stories describe construction techniques that sound fantastical, yet align remarkably with the acoustic properties that modern researchers have documented at the site. The ancestral builders would gather around massive basalt columns and begin a complex harmonic chanting, their voices combining in frequencies that made the stones resonate until they became light as air. Teams of singers could then guide these levitated blocks into precise positions, assembling complex structures with mathematical precision that would have been impossible through conventional construction methods. Elder Pak Suherman, whose family has lived in the shadow of Gunung Padang for 7 generations, speaks of these traditions with the matter-of-fact certainty of someone describing well-established historical facts. His grandfather told him stories that his grandfather had learned from his grandfather, creating an unbroken chain of oral transmission stretching back into the depths of time. These are not recent inventions inspired by modern archaeological discoveries, but ancient memories preserved within family traditions that predate any scientific investigation of the site. The legends describe the original builders as possessing crystalline devices that could focus and amplify natural earth energies. These crystal technologies allowed them to work in harmony with geological forces rather than fighting against them, creating structures that enhanced, rather than disrupted, the natural flow of telluric currents through the landscape. The builders understood that mountains and hills were not merely piles of rock, but complex energy systems with their own rhythms and patterns that could be harnessed for human purposes. More intriguing still are the stories describing the purpose behind Gunung Padang's construction. According to Sundanese tradition, the site was built as a beacon, a kind of lighthouse that operated not on visible light, but on subtler frequencies that could be detected by sensitive individuals across vast distances. The acoustic properties that modern researchers have documented were apparently just one aspect of a more complex communication system that connected this site with others around the ancient world. The oral traditions speak of a global network of such sites, each one positioned to take advantage of specific geological and astronomical conditions that would optimize their function as communication nodes. During certain celestial alignments, when planetary positions created optimal conditions for energy transmission, these sites could exchange information across oceanic distances. The builders of Gunung Padang were apparently part of a sophisticated civilization with global reach and advanced understanding of forces that modern science is only beginning to recognize. Local shamanic practices preserve what may be fragments of these ancient technologies. Traditional healers in the region still perform ceremonies on Gunung's terraces, using specific sound frequencies and geometric movements to achieve altered states of consciousness. They report that certain locations on the hill possess unusual properties that amplify psychic abilities and facilitate communication with non-physical realms. These practices might represent degenerated remnants of much more sophisticated technologies once employed by the site's original builders. The legends describe the end of the Golden Age in terms that align remarkably with geological evidence for the catastrophic climate changes that marked the transition from the Ice Age to our current interglacial period. According to oral tradition, the ancient builders foresaw a coming time of great earth changes, when much of their civilization would be destroyed by rising waters and shifting climates. Gunung Padang was constructed, in part, as a repository of essential knowledge that could survive these catastrophes and be rediscovered by later generations. The stories tell of archives hidden within the hill's interior, crystalline storage devices containing the accumulated wisdom of the lost civilization. These repositories were designed to remain dormant until humanity had developed sufficient spiritual and technological maturity to access them safely. The oral traditions suggest that the current period of archaeological investigation represents the beginning of this rediscovery process, as modern humans finally develop the tools and understanding necessary to unlock the site's deepest secrets. Linguistic analysis of these oral traditions reveals layers of meaning that support their antiquity. The most ancient elements of the stories use archaic Sundanese terms that have been preserved in ceremonial contexts but have otherwise vanished from common usage. These linguistic fossils suggest that the core narratives date to periods far earlier than the historical emergence of documented Sundanese culture, possibly preserving memories from pre-agricultural societies with entirely different technological capabilities. The ceremonial calendar associated with Gunung Padang reflects astronomical knowledge that may also derive from these ancient sources. Traditional festivals and rituals performed at the site are timed to coincide with specific stellar alignments and lunar phases that appear to enhance the acoustic properties of the stone structures. This astronomical timing suggests that the oral traditions preserve not just stories about the past, but practical knowledge about how to interact with the site's technological systems. Comparative mythology reveals similar themes in cultures around the world, suggesting that the Sundanese legends of Gunung Padang may be part of a global tradition preserving memories of Ice Age civilizations. Stories of giants who built with sound and light of golden ages, destroyed by floods and earthquakes, of hidden repositories of ancient wisdom, waiting to be rediscovered. These themes appear in mythologies from South America to the Mediterranean, from the Pacific Islands to the highlands of Tibet. The persistence of these oral traditions through centuries of cultural change, colonial occupation, and modernization speaks to their deep significance within Sundanese consciousness. Even today, local communities approach Gunung Padang with reverence that reflects not just respect for ancestral heritage, but awareness that they are guardians of something far older and more important than conventional archaeology acknowledges. As modern researchers work to decode the mysteries of Gunung Padang using advanced scientific instruments, the oral traditions of local communities offer a different kind of evidence, the preserved memories of peoples whose ancestors may have witnessed the site as original construction and use. These stories, encoded in the amber of oral tradition, provide glimpses of human capabilities and cosmic understanding that official history has forgotten, but which may be essential for comprehending what lies beneath the modest hill that guards such extraordinary secrets. 12,900 years ago, the world changed in ways that would reshape the entire trajectory of human civilization. The transition was not gradual, as climate changes typically are, but sudden and catastrophic. Within a matter of decades, possibly even years, global temperatures plummeted, ice sheets advanced across continents that had been warming for millennia, and sea levels fluctuated wildly as massive freshwater lakes burst through ice dams and poured into the oceans. This event, known to scientists as the Younger Dryas, marked one of the most dramatic climate reversals in Earth's recent geological history. Named after a small Arctic flower whose pollen appears in sediment layers from this period, the Younger Dryas represents a 1,000-year return to near-glacial conditions, just when the world seemed to be emerging from the Ice Age. The implications for human societies that had adapted to the gradually warming climate would have been devastating. The cause of this climate catastrophe remains debated among scientists, but the effects are written clearly in geological records around the world. Ice cores from Greenland show temperature drops of 10 degrees Celsius within a single decade. Marine sediments reveal massive disruptions to ocean circulation patterns. Pollen records document the wholesale replacement of temperate forests with tundra vegetation across vast regions of North America and Europe. For any advanced civilizations that might have existed during the preceding warmer period, the Younger Dryas would have represented an existential crisis of unimaginable proportions. Agricultural systems would have collapsed as growing seasons shortened and reliable precipitation patterns disappeared. Coastal settlements would have faced repeated flooding and sea level changes as ice sheets advanced and retreated unpredictably. Trade networks spanning continents would have been severed by advancing glaciers and changing geography. The timing of this catastrophe provides a crucial context for understanding sites like Gunung Padang. If the Indonesian pyramid complex truly dates to 28,000 years ago, it would have been constructed during the earlier, more stable phases of the Ice Age, long before the climate chaos that marked its end. The builders would have created their monument during a period when, despite the global ice coverage, certain equatorial regions maintained relatively stable climatic conditions. Archaeological evidence from around the world suggests that the Younger Dryas marked a fundamental break in human cultural development. Many sophisticated hunter-gatherer cultures that had flourished during the preceding millennia simply vanished from the archaeological record during this period. Sites that show evidence of complex social organization, advanced tool technologies, and sophisticated artistic expression are often abandoned abruptly, with no clear cultural continuity into later periods. The megafauna extinctions that occurred during the Younger Dryas add another dimension to the catastrophe. Mammoths, giant ground sloths, cave bears, and dozens of other large species disappeared from multiple continents within a remarkably short time frame. These extinctions eliminated not just individual species, but entire ecological systems that had supported human societies for tens of thousands of years. Hunting cultures that had specialized in mammoth hunting, for example, would have faced complete economic collapse. Recent research has identified possible extraterrestrial causes for the Younger Dryas onset. Evidence for a cosmic impact event around 12,900 years ago includes widespread deposits of nandodiamonds, magnetic microspherules, and other exotic materials that typically result from asteroid or comet impacts. While this impact hypothesis remains controversial, it would explain both the suddenness of the climate change and the widespread extinctions that characterize this period. If such an impact occurred, its effects would have been felt globally within a matter of hours or days. Massive wildfires would have burned across continents. Tsunamis would have devastated coastal regions. The injection of dust and debris into the atmosphere would have blocked sunlight and triggered the rapid cooling that characterizes the Younger Dryas. Any advanced civilizations existing at the time would have faced destruction on a scale that makes historical catastrophes seem minor by comparison. The implications for understanding sites like Gunung Padang are profound. If the pyramid complex was indeed built during the earlier, more stable phases of the Ice Age, it represents not just ancient human achievement, but survival through one of Earth's most devastating natural catastrophes. The fact that the site shows evidence of continued use and modification over many millennia suggests that its builders or their descendants successfully weathered the Younger Dryas crisis. This survival might explain some of the more mysterious aspects of Gunung Padang's construction. The sophisticated understanding of geology and earthquake engineering evident in the site's design would have been essential for surviving the seismic activity that accompanied major climate changes. The complex water management systems would have been crucial for adapting to changing precipitation patterns. The acoustic properties might have served as communication systems connecting scattered survivor populations. The oral traditions of Indonesian peoples preserve memories of great catastrophes that align remarkably well with the geological timeline of the Younger Dryas. Stories speak of times when the sky caught fire, when mountains moved, and when the sea rose to swallow great cities. These narratives describe survivor populations taking refuge in highland areas, carrying with them the knowledge and technologies of their destroyed civilization. Global mythologies contain similar themes of worldwide catastrophes occurring at the end of a golden age. The biblical flood, the Hindu cycles of destruction and renewal, the Norse Ragnarok, the Aztec legends of previous worlds destroyed by fire and flood, all may preserve cultural memories of the actual environmental catastrophes that marked the end of the Ice Age. These stories consistently describe advanced civilizations being destroyed by natural forces, with only small groups of survivors carrying their knowledge into a new age. The recovery period following the Younger Dryas saw the rapid emergence of agriculture and complex societies in multiple regions around the world. This sudden flowering of human civilization, traditionally attributed to independent invention in different regions, might instead represent the reapplication of knowledge preserved by survivors of earlier, more advanced cultures. The builders of sites like Göbekli Tepe and early Mesopotamian cities might have been working from technological and organizational templates preserved from the pre-catastrophe period. Modern climate research reveals that such rapid, catastrophic changes remain possible in our own era. The discovery that climate systems can shift between stable states within decades rather than centuries or millennia has profound implications for understanding both past catastrophes and future risks. The Younger Dryas demonstrates that advanced civilizations can face existential threats from environmental changes that develop faster than social and technological systems can adapt. As researchers continue to investigate sites like Gunung Padang, the Younger Dryas provides a crucial temporal framework for understanding what they might be discovering. Evidence of Ice Age monumentality takes on new significance when viewed against the backdrop of global catastrophe. These sites might represent not just ancient achievement, but testament to human resilience in the face of planetary-scale disaster. The stones of Gunung Padang have stood for millennia, weathering not just the gradual erosion of time, but potentially the most dramatic climate changes in recent Earth history. Their survival serves as a bridge between the lost worlds that came before the Great Catastrophe and the civilizations that emerged from its aftermath, carrying within their carefully arranged geometry the memories of humanity's deepest past. Pak Dod had worked the terraced slopes below Gunung Padang for more than 40 years, his hands shaped by decades of coaxing rice and vegetables from the volcanic soil that his grandfather had called blessed. Each morning, he would walk the same paths his family had followed for generations, past the stone columns that emerged from the earth at angles that seemed almost deliberate, through groves where his children played among arrangements of massive basalt blocks that had always been there, as permanent and unremarkable as the mountains themselves. The villagers had always known the hill was special. Their grandmothers spoke of it in whispers, their children avoided certain paths after dark, and the local Dukon, the traditional spiritual healer, would climb to its summit during the full moon to perform ceremonies that connected the living with the ancestors. But to Pak Dod, these were simply the normal rhythms of village life, no more mysterious than the way certain fields produced better harvests, or the way certain trees attracted particular birds. It was during the dry season of 1998, when the rains failed and water became precious, that Pak Dod first noticed something that would change his understanding of the hill forever. While digging a new irrigation channel to carry water from the higher slopes to his drought-stressed crops, his hoe struck something hard beneath the soil. Expecting another of the countless volcanic rocks that made farming in this region such back-breaking work, he began to dig around the obstruction to remove it. What emerged from the red earth was unlike any rock he had encountered in 4 decades of farming. The stone was massive, far too large for him to move alone, but its surfaces were smooth and clearly worked by human hands. More puzzling still, it was positioned at an angle that seemed to follow a deliberate pattern, aligned with similar stones that became visible as he expanded his excavation. The arrangement was too regular, too purposeful to be natural, yet it lay buried beneath soil layers that his grandfather had cultivated without ever suspecting what lay beneath. As word of Pak Dod's discovery spread through the village, other farmers began to share their own experiences. Pak Ruslan remembered his father mentioning strange stone formations encountered while digging wells. Ibu Sari recalled her grandmother's stories about the old people who built with stones that sang when the wind passed through them. Pak Hazan described geometric patterns he had noticed in the exposed rock faces when clearing land for new terraces. Patterns he had assumed were natural, but now began to see differently. The local Kepala Desa village head visited Pak Dod's excavation and agreed that something unusual had been uncovered. But rather than reporting the discovery to archaeological authorities, he suggested that the stones be quietly reburied. The village had endured enough disruption from outside interference over the years. Government officials brought regulations and restrictions that made farming more difficult. Researchers brought attention that disturbed the peaceful rhythms of rural life. Better to let the ancestors keep their secrets than to invite complications from the modern world. But Pak Dod found himself unable to forget what he had glimpsed beneath his fields. During quiet evening hours, when the day's work was done and the family gathered for their simple dinner of rice and vegetables, he would find his thoughts returning to those carefully positioned stones. He began to notice details about Gunung Padang that had been invisible to him for decades. The way the hill's profile seemed too regular to be entirely natural, the precision of the terraces that had always been there, the mathematical relationships between the visible stone formations. More disturbing still were the dreams that began to visit him during the hot nights when sleep came fitfully. He would find himself walking through landscapes that were familiar yet different. The same mountains and valleys he knew by heart, but with cities where now there were only rice fields, with great stone buildings where now there were only scattered megalithic remnants. In these dreams, people moved the massive stones through methods he couldn't understand, using sounds and movements that seemed to make the blocks weightless as air. When the researchers finally arrived in 2010, drawn by reports that had somehow reached archaeological circles despite the village's attempts at discretion. Pak Dod watched their initial surveys with a mixture of vindication and apprehension. Their sophisticated instruments confirmed what he had suspected for 12 years, that beneath the deceptively simple agricultural landscape lay structures of remarkable complexity and apparent antiquity. Dr. Nadawija approached Pak Dod with the respect due to someone whose local knowledge had proven more accurate than official archaeological assessments. The geologist listened carefully as the farmer described not just his own discoveries, but the accumulated observations of generations of villagers who had lived intimately with the landscape. The stories of stones that produced musical tones, of geometric patterns visible to those who knew how to look, of subtle alignments that connected different parts of the hill, all proved relevant to the scientific investigation. As the research progressed and international attention focused on Gunung Padang, Pak Dod found himself transformed from a simple farmer into an unofficial guardian of ancient knowledge. Visitors would seek him out, hoping to learn about local traditions and observations that might shed light on the site's mysteries. He discovered that his decades of intimate familiarity with the landscape provided insights that sophisticated instruments could supplement but not replace. The academic debates about dating and authenticity seemed almost irrelevant to Pak Dod's understanding of the site. Whether the structures were 2,000 or 28,000 years old mattered less to him than the simple fact that his ancestors had always known this place was special. The stones had been telling their story for generations to anyone willing to listen. It had simply taken the modern world a very long time to develop ears capable hearing what the village had always known. On quiet evenings now, as Pak Dod tends his fields in the shadow of terraces that may be humanity's oldest monumental architecture, he sometimes reflects on the strange turns that life can take. A failed irrigation channel had led to one of archaeology's most controversial discoveries. A farmer's hoe had struck upon evidence that might rewrite human history. The ancestors, it seemed, had their own ways of ensuring that their stories would eventually be told. The dreams still come sometimes, visions of a time when the hill was alive with purposeful activity, when the stones sang with frequencies that connected earth to sky. Whether these are memories inherited across millennia or simply the product of an imagination stimulated by too much excitement, Pak Dod cannot say. But he knows that the land remembers, even when people forget, and that truth has a way of emerging from the earth when the time is right for it to be found. In the hours before dawn, when the tropical air carries the scent of night-blooming flowers and the first bird calls echo across the terraces, Gunung Padang reveals one of its most profound secrets. As darkness gives way to the subtle gradations of approaching sunrise, careful observers positioned at specific points on the ancient structure can witness alignments that speak of sophisticated astronomical knowledge, possessed by the site's mysterious builders. Dr. Frederica Soga, an Indonesian archaeoastronomer who has spent years mapping the precise orientations of Gunung Padang's stone arrangements, describes the experience with the reverence of someone who has glimpsed the mind of ancient sky watchers. Standing at designated observation points on the terraces, aligned stones frame the rising sun at the summer solstice with mathematical precision that could not have occurred by chance. The sophistication of these alignments becomes apparent only through careful measurement and extended observation. Unlike the obvious solar orientations found at sites like Stonehenge, where massive trilithons create dramatic frames for celestial events, Gunung Padang's astronomical functions are subtle, integrated into the landscape with the same organic elegance that characterizes all aspects of the site's design. The primary solar alignment occurs along the site's main axis, where a series of megalithic columns creates a precise sightline toward the point on the eastern horizon where the sun rises on the summer solstice. But this is merely the most obvious of many astronomical relationships built into the structure. Secondary alignments mark the winter solstice, the equinoxes, and the extreme positions of the moon's rising and setting points throughout its complex 18.6-year cycle. More intriguing still are the stellar alignments that suggest the builders possess detailed knowledge of precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that causes the positions of stars to shift gradually over periods of thousands of years. Certain stone configurations appear to target not the current positions of bright stars, but their locations during much earlier historical periods, providing independent evidence for the site's claimed antiquity. The constellation Orion features prominently in these stellar alignments, which is particularly significant given the symbolic importance of this star pattern in cultures around the world. The three stones of Orion's belt held special significance for ancient Egyptian, Mayan, and Aboriginal Australian astronomers, often being associated with creation myths and the souls of the dead. At Gunung Padang, specific stone arrangements frame the rising of Orion as belt stars, as they would have appeared thousands of years ago. The precision required for such alignments speaks to mathematical capabilities far beyond what mainstream archaeology attributes to Ice Age peoples. Creating accurate astronomical sightlines requires not just careful observation of celestial movements, but sophisticated understanding of geometric principles, measurement standards, and long-term planning. The builders needed to account for the effects of precession, atmospheric refraction, and the site's specific latitude and elevation. Local oral traditions preserve memories of the astronomical purposes behind Gunung's construction. Village elders speak of the Stargate ceremonies performed at specific times when celestial alignments activated the site as spiritual functions. According to these stories, the ancient builders understood that certain astronomical configurations created optimal conditions for communication with divine realms or distant locations. The acoustic properties of Gunung Padang interact with these astronomical alignments in ways that suggest integrated design principles. During specific celestial events, when planets and stars occupy particular positions, the site's stone arrangements produce unique harmonic patterns. These acoustic phenomena might have served as audible confirmations of astronomical events, allowing the ancient users to experience cosmic alignments through multiple senses simultaneously. Comparative analysis reveals that Gunung Padang's astronomical orientations share similarities with other megalithic sites around the world, suggesting either cultural contact between widely separated civilizations or the preservation of common astronomical traditions from much earlier periods. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Nabda Playa in Egypt, and Karnak in France all incorporate stellar alignments that target similar celestial phenomena using comparable geometric principles. The mathematical relationships embedded in these alignments demonstrate knowledge that extends far beyond simple horizon observations. The builders of Gunung Padang appear to have understood concepts of spherical trigonometry, coordinate systems, and time measurement that allowed them to predict celestial events far into the future. Such knowledge typically requires generations of accumulated observation in sophisticated methods for preserving and transmitting complex information. Modern astronomical calculations confirm that the primary alignments at Gunung Padang would have functioned with optimal accuracy during the time periods suggested by radiocarbon dating. The stellar sightlines point to star positions that occurred roughly 20,000 to 28,000 years ago, providing independent confirmation of the controversial dating evidence. This correlation between astronomical and archaeological evidence adds significant weight to claims of extreme antiquity. The lunar alignments at Gunung Padang reveal particularly sophisticated understanding of selenological cycles. The moon has complex movements, involving not just the familiar monthly phases, but also the longer-term cycles of its changing orbital relationships with Earth and Sun, require decades of careful observation to master. The builders incorporated alignments that track the moon's maximum and minimum rising and setting positions, phenomena that repeat only every 18.6 years. Venus, the brightest planet, also plays a role in Gunung Padang's astronomical program. Certain stone arrangements track the complex 8-year cycle of Venus's appearances as both morning and evening star. This planet held special significance for many ancient cultures due to its brightness and distinctive movement patterns, often being associated with goddesses of love, fertility, and rebirth. The integration of multiple astronomical phenomena into a single architectural complex demonstrates systematic knowledge that required not just careful observation, but theoretical understanding of celestial mechanics. The builders needed to recognize that the apparently chaotic movements of sun, moon, planets, and stars actually follow predictable mathematical relationships that could be encoded in permanent stone monuments. Weather records from the region confirm that Gunung's location provides exceptional conditions for astronomical observation. The high altitude, equatorial latitude, and relatively stable climate create optimal visibility for tracking celestial phenomena. The site's position allows observation of both northern and southern stellar hemispheres, providing access to astronomical phenomena that would be invisible from more extreme latitudes. As modern researchers continue to decode the astronomical functions built into Gunung Padang's design, they encounter knowledge systems that challenge fundamental assumptions about human intellectual development. The mathematical sophistication, observational precision, and long-term planning required for such achievements suggest that our ancestors possessed scientific capabilities far more advanced than traditional archaeology has recognized. Standing on the ancient terraces, as stars wheel overhead in patterns that have remained constant since the site's construction, one can almost feel the presence of those ancient astronomers who first mapped these celestial relationships in stone. Their monument continues to track the movements of heaven with the same precision they built into it millennia ago, a testament to knowledge that transcends the boundaries of time itself. The first time archaeologist Dr. Sarah Tusui struck one of Gunung Padang's megalithic columns with a geological hammer, she expected to hear the dull thunk typical of basaltic rock. Instead, the stone produced a clear, resonant note that hung in the tropical air like a temple bell. More remarkable still, when she moved to adjacent columns and repeated the experiment, each stone sang with a different pitch, creating the unmistakable impression of a massive stone instrument spread across the ancient terraces. This discovery would lead to one of the most intriguing aspects of Gunung Padang research, the recognition that the site's builders possessed sophisticated understanding of acoustic engineering that rivals or exceeds our modern capabilities. What initially seemed like a curious anomaly has revealed itself as evidence of intentional design principles that integrate sound, stone, and human consciousness in ways that modern science is only beginning to understand. Systematic acoustic mapping of the site reveals that the phenomenon extends far beyond randomly resonant stones. Different areas of the complex produce distinct tonal ranges, creating acoustic zones that correspond with the site's geometric organization. The lower terraces tend to produce deeper, more resonant tones, while the upper levels generate higher frequencies. The overall effect resembles a vast stone organ with different stops distributed across the hillside. The precision of these acoustic properties becomes apparent through detailed frequency analysis. Many of the stones produce pure tones with minimal harmonic distortion, a characteristic typically associated with carefully tuned instruments rather than natural rock formations. More remarkably, groups of adjacent stones often create harmonic relationships, producing chords and interval relationships that follow mathematical principles identical to those underlying Western musical theory. Indonesian sound engineer Bambang Sulistyo has documented over 200 distinct tones produced by different stones throughout the site. His recordings reveal complex acoustic phenomena that extend beyond simple percussion effects. Some stones continue to resonate for several seconds after being struck, creating sustained tones that can interact with sounds produced by other stones. Certain combinations create beating patterns and interference effects that produce entirely new frequencies not present in the individual stones. The acoustic properties appear to be enhanced by the site's architectural features. Stone chambers and passages create resonance effects that amplify and modify the tones produced by individual columns. The terraced structure channels sound waves in specific directions, creating acoustic focal points where multiple tones converge with enhanced clarity and volume. The overall design functions as an integrated acoustic system rather than a collection of individual sound sources. Local traditions preserve memories of the site's acoustic functions that extend far beyond simple music making. Village elders describe ceremonies where coordinated drumming on the resonant stones could produce sounds audible across vast distances, a kind of acoustic telegraph system that connected Gunung Padang with other sites throughout the region. These stories suggest that the acoustic properties serve practical communication purposes as well as ritual functions. The geological processes that create such acoustic properties in natural stone are well understood, but their occurrence in such systematic patterns at Gunung Padang suggests deliberate selection and modification of materials. The builders appear to have identified naturally resonant stones and then shaped or positioned them to enhance their acoustic characteristics. Some columns show evidence of careful tuning through selective removal of material to achieve desired frequencies. Research into the relationship between stone composition and acoustic properties reveals that the builders possessed sophisticated understanding of material science. The most resonant stones at Gunung Padang consist of specific mineral compositions that optimize vibrational characteristics. The builders somehow identified and selected these materials from among the various volcanic rocks available in the region, suggesting systematic testing and evaluation procedures. Experiments with coordinated percussion across multiple stones reveal even more sophisticated acoustic engineering. When groups of stones are struck in specific sequences, they create complex polyrhythmic patterns that can induce altered states of consciousness in listeners. These effects appear to result from precise mathematical relationships between the frequencies involved, suggesting that the builders understood principles of acoustic psychology that modern science has only recently begun to investigate. The acoustic phenomena at Gunung Padang share similarities with those documented at other megalithic sites around the world. The stone chambers at Newgrange in Ireland, the galleries of the Great Pyramid in Egypt, and the temples of Malta all demonstrate sophisticated acoustic engineering that appears to serve ritual rather than purely practical purposes. The global distribution of such acoustic sophistication suggests either widespread cultural exchange or common knowledge traditions of remarkable antiquity. Modern research into the effects of specific sound frequencies on human consciousness provides context for understanding the possible functions of Gunung Padang's acoustic properties. Certain frequencies can induce meditative states, enhance cognitive function, or facilitate what researchers term non-ordinary states of consciousness. The stone tones documented at Gunung Padang fall within frequency ranges that modern studies have identified as particularly effective for such purposes. The integration of acoustic and astronomical functions at Gunung Padang suggests even more sophisticated design principles. Certain stone combinations produce their most harmonious tones when struck during specific celestial alignments, as if the acoustic properties were calibrated to celestial mechanics. This integration of sound and astronomy might have created multisensory experiences that connected earthbound ceremonies with cosmic cycles. Ethnomusicological research reveals that many indigenous cultures possess sophisticated understanding of the relationship between specific sounds and altered states of consciousness. Tibetan singing bowls, Aboriginal didgeridoos, and Native American drums all employ acoustic principles similar to those evident at Gunung Padang. The site's builders might have been applying knowledge traditions that modern Western culture has largely forgotten, but which remain preserved in traditional societies around the world. The preservation of Gunung Padang's acoustic properties across millennia speaks to the durability of the engineering principles involved. Unlike the wooden instruments of historical cultures, which decay and must be constantly replaced, the stone acoustics of Gunung Padang continue to function with the same clarity and precision they possessed when first created. The site remains a functional instrument, waiting for musicians sophisticated enough to play it properly. Recent experiments involving coordinated groups of percussionists playing Gunung Padang stone instruments have recreated some of the acoustic effects described in local oral traditions. The resulting sounds carry across considerable distances, creating acoustic experiences that seem to emerge from the landscape itself rather than from identifiable point sources. These phenomena might explain stories of voices from the ancestors that traditional communities associate with the site. As acoustic researchers continue to decode the sophisticated sound engineering built into Gunung Padang, they encounter evidence of knowledge systems that challenge conventional understanding of ancient capabilities. The mathematical precision, material science understanding, and psychological sophistication required for such acoustic engineering suggests that the site's builders possessed scientific knowledge that rivals our modern understanding of sound and its effects on human consciousness. Standing among the resonant stones as evening approaches and the day's heat gives way to cooler air, visitors often report profound emotional responses to the site's acoustic properties. The stones seem to hum with subtle frequencies, even when not deliberately activated, creating an ambient soundscape that feels both ancient and somehow alive. In these moments, the boundary between archaeological site and living instrument dissolves, revealing Gunung Padang as something far more dynamic and interactive than static stone ruins. As researchers delve deeper into the mysteries of Gunung Padang, a remarkable pattern begins to emerge across the archaeological landscape of our planet. The Indonesian site is not alone in challenging conventional chronologies and suggesting the existence of sophisticated prehistoric civilizations. Around the world, scattered across continents and cultures, similar anomalies have been discovered. Ancient monuments that appear far too old and far too sophisticated for their supposed time periods. In the highlands of southeastern Turkey, Göbekli Tepe has already revolutionized archaeological thinking about the capabilities of pre-agricultural societies. This massive complex of stone circles and carved pillars, officially dated to over 11,000 years old, demonstrates organizational and artistic capabilities that mainstream archaeology previously attributed to much later civilizations. The site's sophisticated astronomical alignments, complex symbolic imagery, and evidence of coordinated labor by large populations all challenge the traditional narrative of gradual cultural development. The parallels between Göbekli Tepe and Gunung Padang extend beyond their controversial antiquity. Both sites demonstrate sophisticated understanding of acoustic principles, with stone structures that produce distinct resonant frequencies when activated. Both incorporate complex astronomical alignments that require advanced mathematical knowledge to achieve. Both appear to have been deliberately buried or abandoned, as if their builders intended to preserve them for future discovery. On the opposite side of the Pacific, the ancient city of Caral in Peru presents another piece of this global puzzle. Officially dated to over 4,600 years old, Caral challenges assumptions about the development of complex civilization in the Americas. The site's sophisticated urban planning, monumental architecture, and evidence of advanced textile and musical technologies all suggest capabilities that official histories place thousands of years later. More intriguing still are the recently discovered structures off the coast of various continents, submerged beneath sea levels that rose dramatically at the end of the last ice age. Yonaguni Monument off Japan, the structures off the coast of India near Dwarka, and the alleged pyramid complexes detected on the ocean floor near the Azores all suggest the existence of advanced civilizations during periods when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower than today. The island complex of Non Madol in Micronesia presents perhaps the most striking parallel to Gunung Padang's mysteries. This massive construction project, involving the transportation and precise placement of enormous basalt columns across a lagoon, demonstrates engineering capabilities that seem impossible given the traditional technological limitations attributed to Pacific island cultures. the acoustic properties of non-metal stone chambers, the astronomical alignments of its major structures, and the precision of its megalithic construction, all echo themes found at sites around the world. Megalithic sites across Europe reveal similar patterns of sophisticated engineering and astronomical knowledge that predate the supposed development of such capabilities. The stone circles of Britain, the alignments of Karnak in France, and the dolmens scattered across the Mediterranean all incorporate mathematical principles and construction techniques that challenge conventional understanding of prehistoric European cultures. In South America, sites like Sacsayhuaman in Peru and Tiwanaku in Bolivia demonstrate stoneworking capabilities that modern engineers find difficult to replicate even with contemporary technology. The precision of the fitted stones, some weighing hundreds of tons, suggests construction techniques that have been lost to history. The astronomical alignments built into these structures require mathematical knowledge that official histories attribute to much later periods. Africa contributes its own anomalies to this global pattern. The megalithic sites of Nabta Playa in Egypt predate Stonehenge by over 1,000 years and demonstrate sophisticated astronomical knowledge among supposedly simple pastoral peoples. The massive stone structures of Zimbabwe and South Africa show evidence of advanced engineering and organizational capabilities that don't fit conventional models of African cultural development. Even Antarctica, now buried beneath miles of ice, may harbor evidence of this global pattern. Satellite imagery and ground-penetrating radar have detected what appear to be artificial structures beneath the ice sheet, raising the possibility that this now frozen continent once supported advanced civilizations during warmer climatic periods. The common features shared by these globally distributed sites suggest either extensive cultural contact between widely separated civilizations or the preservation of knowledge traditions from a common, much earlier source. The mathematical principles underlying their astronomical alignments, the acoustic engineering evident in their stone structures, the sophisticated understanding of geology and seismology required for their construction, all point to shared knowledge systems that transcend boundaries of individual cultures. Genetic research adds another dimension to this global pattern. Studies of human migration patterns reveal sophisticated maritime capabilities during the final phases of the Ice Age, with evidence of oceanic crossings and island colonization that require advanced navigation and shipbuilding technologies. The rapid spread of certain cultural innovations across vast distances suggests communication networks far more extensive than traditional archaeology acknowledges. The timing of many of these sites clusters around specific periods that correspond with major climatic transitions. Many show evidence of construction or major modification during the period leading up to the Younger Dryas catastrophe, suggesting that their builders possessed knowledge of impending environmental changes and were preparing for survival through difficult periods. Linguistic analysis reveals another layer of connection between these globally distributed sites. Many cultures preserve similar flood myths, stories of golden ages destroyed by natural catastrophes, and legends of advanced ancestors who possessed seemingly magical technologies. The consistency of these themes across cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other suggests either shared historical experiences or preservation of actual memories from much earlier periods. The technology required for some of these construction projects appears to exceed what is available to modern engineering in certain specific areas. The precision of stone cutting at sites like Puma Pongku, the acoustic properties of chambers at Nugrange, and the astronomical calculations built into the Gozek Circle all demonstrate capabilities that challenge our understanding of what is possible with supposedly primitive technologies. Modern attempts to replicate the construction techniques evident at these sites have generally failed to achieve the same precision and durability demonstrated by the original builders. Despite access to modern tools and extensive engineering knowledge, contemporary efforts to move and precisely position megalithic blocks consistently fall short of the standards achieved by ancient builders using supposedly simple technologies. As this global pattern of anomalous sites continues to emerge through ongoing archaeological research, it forces a fundamental reconsideration of human cultural development. Rather than the gradual, linear progression from simple to complex that has dominated archaeological interpretation, the evidence suggests a much more complex history involving advanced civilizations, catastrophic disruptions, and repeated cycles of loss and rediscovery. Gunung Padang takes its place within this global context not as an isolated anomaly, but as part of a worldwide network of sites that preserve evidence of human capabilities and knowledge systems that official history has forgotten. The hill in Java becomes a window into a much larger story about the true antiquity and sophistication of human civilization, challenging us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about our species' journey through deep time. Who were they, these mysterious builders whose legacy lies buried beneath the deceptive tranquility of Gunung Padang's terraced slopes? The question haunts every researcher who has walked among the ancient stone arrangements, measured their mathematical precision, and contemplated the sophisticated knowledge systems their construction required. If the controversial dating is accurate, we are confronting evidence of human capabilities that existed during Earth's last ice age, a time when mainstream science insists our ancestors lived in small, struggling bands focused entirely on survival. The conventional narrative offers no comfortable explanation for such builders. 28,000 years ago, according to established archaeological chronology, the global human population numbered perhaps a few 100,000 individuals scattered across vast continents. These populations lived as hunter-gatherers, their entire existence devoted to finding food, shelter, and safety in a harsh world dominated by ice sheets and megafauna. The organizational capacity, technical knowledge, and labor surplus required for monumental construction simply did not exist within such societies. Yet the evidence from Gunung Padang suggests builders who possessed not just the ability to move and precisely position massive stone blocks, but sophisticated understanding of mathematics, astronomy, acoustics, and geology. These were not random achievements by isolated geniuses, but systematic applications of knowledge that required generations to develop and complex social institutions to preserve and transmit across time. One possibility that emerges from this paradox is that human civilization developed along entirely different trajectories than currently believed. Perhaps the linear progression from simple hunter-gatherers to complex agricultural societies represents only one possible path of human development. Alternative trajectories might have produced sophisticated cultures based on entirely different foundations. Maritime civilizations that left few terrestrial traces, nomadic societies with advanced portable technologies, or highland communities that developed complex knowledge systems without urban infrastructure. The Ice Age world was fundamentally different from our contemporary environment, with vast continental shelves exposed by lower sea levels, creating landmasses that are now submerged beneath hundreds of feet of water. The Indonesian archipelago formed part of a massive continental extension called Sundaland, connecting what are now islands into a single landmass larger than modern Australia. Such geography could have supported populations and civilizations whose remains now lie beyond the reach of conventional archaeological investigation. Maritime peoples adapted to this environment of fluctuating coastlines and changing islands might have developed technologies and social organizations completely different than the terrestrial civilizations that dominate historical records. Their monuments might have been designed for mobility or constructed in locations now lost beneath risen seas. Their knowledge systems might have been preserved in oral traditions, astronomical observations, and portable technologies that leave minimal archaeological traces. The genetic evidence for human populations during the Ice Age suggests much greater sophistication than traditional archaeological models acknowledge. Modern DNA studies reveal complex migration patterns, sophisticated seafaring capabilities, and cultural exchanges across vast oceanic distances. These populations possessed advanced navigation technologies, shipbuilding capabilities, and social organizations sophisticated enough to coordinate long-distance expeditions and maintain contact across thousands of miles of open ocean. Climate research adds another dimension to understanding potential Ice Age civilizations. While much of the planet experienced harsh glacial conditions, certain equatorial regions maintained relatively stable and habitable climates throughout the period. These refugia could have supported complex societies that developed advanced technologies and knowledge systems while most of the world remained locked in ice. The Indonesian region, with its volcanic soils, maritime climate, and abundant natural resources, represents exactly the kind of environment where such civilizations might have flourished. The builders of Gunung Padang might represent survivors of such Ice Age civilizations, peoples who possessed advanced knowledge and technologies developed during earlier, more favorable periods, and who adapted their capabilities to changing environmental conditions. The sophisticated understanding of geology and earthquake engineering evident in the site C. Construction suggests builders who had experienced and learned to survive major environmental catastrophes. Local oral traditions preserve memories of these ancient architects that provide insights not available through conventional archaeological evidence. The stories describe builders who possess technologies that seem magical from our contemporary perspective. The ability to move massive stones through acoustic manipulation, to work in harmony with natural forces rather than fighting against them, to integrate spiritual and technical knowledge in ways that modern culture has forgotten. These traditions consistently describe the ancient builders as different from contemporary humans, taller, longer-lived, and possessed of capabilities that transcended normal physical limitations. While such descriptions might seem merely mythological, they could represent cultural memories of peoples who had developed technologies and knowledge systems so advanced that they appeared supernatural to later populations with more limited capabilities. The astronomical knowledge evident at Gunung Padang suggests builders who possessed not just sophisticated observational capabilities, but theoretical understanding of celestial mechanics that required generations of accumulated knowledge to develop. Such astronomical sophistication typically requires written records or highly structured oral traditions maintained by specialist priest astronomers, social institutions that imply complex civilizations rather than simple hunter-gatherer bands. The acoustic engineering built into Gunung Padang's design reflects understanding of sound physics and psychology that modern science has only recently begun to investigate. The builders knew how to select and modify stones to produce specific frequencies, how to create acoustic spaces that enhance particular psychological states, and how to integrate sound with astronomical alignments to create multisensory ceremonial experiences. Such knowledge represents the accumulated wisdom of cultures with sophisticated understanding of human consciousness and its relationship to natural forces. The precision of Gunung Padang's construction suggests builders who possessed standardized measurement systems, quality control procedures, and project management capabilities that allowed them to coordinate complex construction efforts over extended periods. These organizational capabilities imply social institutions, leadership hierarchies, and communication systems far more sophisticated than traditional archaeology attributes to Ice Age peoples. Alternative researchers propose that these builders might represent the last remnants of much earlier advanced civilizations, survivors of Atlantis-like cultures that flourished during previous interglacial periods and were subsequently destroyed by the environmental catastrophes that marked the transitions between ice ages. In this interpretation, sites like Gunung Padang represent not the beginning of human civilization, but the preservation of knowledge from much older and more advanced societies. The technology evident at Gunung Padang might represent not primitive capabilities struggling toward civilization, but sophisticated knowledge systems adapted to post-catastrophe conditions. The builders might have been working with deliberate constraints, using available materials and techniques to preserve essential knowledge while adapting to environmental conditions that no longer supported their original technologies. As researchers continue to investigate the mysteries of Gunung Padang, they confront the possibility that human history is far more complex and ancient than conventional chronologies acknowledge. The architects of these ancient terraces remain shadowy figures, their identities lost in the mists of deep time. But their legacy continues to challenge our understanding of what our ancestors achieved during Earth's distant past. Standing among the precisely positioned stones as shadows lengthen across the terraces, one can almost sense the presence of those ancient builders. Their careful hands, shaping stone, their mathematical minds, calculating alignments, their spiritual understanding, integrating earthly construction with cosmic forces. They remain anonymous, but their work speaks across millennia with a voice that grows clearer as modern science develops tools sophisticated enough to decode their message. Deep beneath Gunung Padang's third terrace at a depth where carbon dating suggested human activity from over 20 years ago, Dr. Andy Arif's excavation team made a discovery that would shake his faith in everything he thought he knew about ancient capabilities. What emerged from the red volcanic soil was a block of andesite that measured precisely 47 centimeters in length, 31 centimeters in width, and 23 centimeters in height. Dimensions that immediately struck the experienced geologist as suspiciously exact. The stone's surface told an even more disturbing story. Unlike the roughly hewn blocks and natural formations that dominated the site's visible structures, this buried specimen bore tool marks of extraordinary precision. Its faces were perfectly flat to within millimeters of tolerance. Its edges met at precise 90-degree angles. Most unsettling of all, its surface showed parallel grooves that ran in perfectly straight lines across its entire length. Marks that appeared to have been made by some kind of mechanical cutting tool. Dr. Arif had spent 15 years studying ancient stonework throughout Indonesia, from the classical temples of Java to the megalithic sites of Sumatra. He knew the characteristics of hand tools, the patterns left by bronze and iron implements, the gradual technological progression that marked human development from simple stone knapping to sophisticated masonry. But the marks on this buried block matched none of those familiar patterns. The grooves were too regular, too perfectly parallel, too precisely spaced to have been made by any hand tool. They showed no variation in depth, no wavering in direction, no signs of the slight irregularities that mark all human craftsmanship before the industrial age. Under microscopic examination, the cutting marks revealed characteristics that modern materials science associates with precision. Machining, the kind of surface finishes that require computer-controlled equipment and diamond-tipped cutting tools. Carbon samples from organic material found directly beneath the stone yielded a radiocarbon, date of 22,450 years, plus or minus 180 years. The stratigraphic context was clear and undisturbed. No evidence existed for later intrusion or contamination that might explain how a precisely machined stone block came to be buried in a layer deposited during the height of the last ice age. Dr. Arif found himself facing a conclusion that contradicted everything his geological training had taught him about human technological development. Either the dating was wrong, the stratigraphy was misunderstood, or human beings possessed precision machining capabilities over 20,000 years ago, a possibility that orthodox archaeology considered absolutely impossible. The discovery created an immediate crisis within the research team. Senior archaeologists demanded additional testing, alternative explanations, anything that might resolve the paradox without requiring acceptance of such revolutionary implications. Some suggested that unusual volcanic activity might have created the precise surface features through unknown geological processes. Others proposed that later civilizations might have somehow inserted the stone into earlier deposits through mechanisms that remain to be discovered. But Dr. Arif's geological expertise made such alternative explanations untenable. Volcanic processes create random, chaotic patterns, not the mathematical precision evident on the stone's surface. Later intrusion would have left clear evidence in the surrounding stratigraphy, signs of disturbance that simply did not exist in the carefully documented layers surrounding the discovery. Independent analysis by material science specialists at the Bandhan Institute of Technology confirmed Dr. Arif's initial assessment. The surface characteristics matched those produced by modern precision machining equipment. The cutting marks showed properties consistent with diamond-tipped tools operated under computer control. The tolerances achieved in the stone's dimensions exceeded what is possible with hand tools, regardless of skill level or time investment. More disturbing still, spectroscopic analysis revealed that the andesite had been modified at the molecular level. The surface layers showed signs of thermal treatment that created microscopic changes in the stone's crystalline structure, changes that typically result from exposure to temperatures and pressures that require sophisticated industrial processes to achieve. The implications terrified Dr. Arif more than excited him. If humans possessed such capabilities 22,000 years ago, entire academic disciplines would require fundamental revision. Archaeological chronologies, technological development models, and basic assumptions about human progress would all need to be reconsidered. His career had been built on expertise that might prove fundamentally flawed. Word of the discovery began to leak beyond the immediate research team, despite attempts to maintain confidentiality while additional tests were conducted. Online forums buzzed with speculation about ancient high technology. Alternative archaeology websites hailed the find as vindication of long-dismissed theories about advanced prehistoric civilizations. Mainstream archaeologists demanded access to the evidence while simultaneously questioning the competence and motivations of the researchers involved. International experts arrived to conduct independent assessments, bringing their own preconceptions and methodological preferences to bear on the controversial stone. Some confirmed the precision of the machining marks and the impossibility of achieving such results with known ancient technologies. Others suggested previously unknown techniques that might account for the evidence without requiring acceptance of advanced prehistoric capabilities. Dr. Arif found himself caught between scientific integrity and professional survival. The evidence was clear and the methodology sound, but the implications challenged fundamental assumptions about human development that formed the foundation of his entire field. Publishing the findings would invite career-ending controversy. Suppressing them would violate his basic obligations as a scientist. The stone itself remained maddeningly silent about its origins and purpose. Unlike tools or weapons that might provide clues about their use, this precisely machined block served no obvious function. Its perfect geometry suggested it might be a component of some larger device or structure, but no other elements had been discovered that might reveal its intended application. Attempts to locate similar artifacts in the surrounding areas yielded frustratingly ambiguous results. Other stones showed signs of sophisticated working, but none displayed the same degree of precision evident in Dr. Arif's discovery. The machined block appeared to be unique, an isolated example of capabilities that might have been much more widespread but left few traces for modern investigators to discover. As months passed and the debates continued, Dr. Arif began to suspect that his discovery represented only a small fragment of a much larger mystery. If ancient peoples possessed precision machining capabilities, they likely possessed many other technologies that have left no obvious traces in the archaeological record. The absence of evidence might reflect not the absence of advanced ancient civilizations, but their use of materials and techniques that do not preserve well over such vast time periods. The stone that shouldn't exist continues to sit in a climate-controlled storage facility, awaiting resolution of debates about its implications and proper interpretation. Its perfect surfaces reflect laboratory lights with the same precision they possessed when first carved over 20,000 years ago, a testament to capabilities that challenge our understanding of what our ancestors achieved in the depths of prehistory. For Dr. Arif, the discovery has become both vindication and burden, proof that the past holds secrets far stranger than conventional wisdom, and knowledge is but also evidence that the comfortable certainties of archaeological science may be built on foundations less solid than anyone wants to admit. In the treasure rooms of ancient libraries and private collections around the world, cartographic mysteries gather dust like whispered secrets from humanity's forgotten past. These are maps that shouldn't exist according to conventional historical timelines, charts showing geographical knowledge that their supposed creators couldn't possibly have possessed, coastlines mapped with accuracy that wouldn't be achieved again for centuries, and lands depicted that official history insists were unknown to ancient civilizations. The most famous of these cartographic enigmas emerged from the personal collection of a Turkish admiral named Piri Reis, whose 1513 world map has puzzled historians and geographers for nearly 5 centuries. The map shows the coastlines of South America and Antarctica with remarkable accuracy, despite being created during an era when Antarctica was supposedly unknown to European explorers, and the southern coast of South America remained largely unmapped by contemporary navigators. More intriguing still, the Piri Reis map appears to show Antarctica without its ice cover, depicting coastline features that match modern radar mapping of the continent's bedrock topography. The implication is staggering. Either Piri Reis had access to sophisticated modern mapping techniques, or his sources included information from a time when Antarctica was ice-free, a geological condition that last existed millions of years ago, far before human civilization was supposed to exist. Piri Reis himself claimed that his map was compiled from much older sources, including charts captured from Spanish explorers who had in turn copied them from even more ancient originals. In the margins of his map, he wrote that some of his sources dated back to the time of Alexander the Great, while others were drawn by the inhabitants of the lands of the Frank, discovered by Christopher Columbus. The admiral was working with a collection of maps that spanned many centuries and cultural traditions. The Orontius Phineas map of 1532 presents an even more detailed view of Antarctica, showing not just the continent's outline, but interior features including mountain ranges and river systems that match modern discoveries of the subglacial landscape. The level of detail suggests systematic exploration and mapping by peoples with sophisticated surveying capabilities. Yet, Antarctica would unofficially be discovered by European explorers until 1820, nearly 3 centuries later. These Antarctic maps become particularly relevant to the Gunung Padang mystery when considered alongside evidence for advanced Ice Age civilizations. If sophisticated maritime cultures existed during periods when sea levels were hundreds of feet lower and global geography was dramatically different, they might have explored and mapped regions that are now inaccessible due to risen seas or accumulated ice. The cartographic evidence suggests knowledge traditions that preserve geographical information across vast periods of time. The Mercator map of 1569 depicts Arctic regions with accuracy that wouldn't be achieved again until satellite mapping in the 20th century. Mercator showed Greenland as an island rather than connected to the mainland, correctly depicted the complex archipelago of the Canadian Arctic, and included geographical features in Siberia that weren't officially explored until centuries later. Like Piri Reis, Mercator acknowledged using much older source materials whose origins he couldn't fully explain. Medieval European maps contain similar anachronistic elements that suggest access to ancient geographical knowledge. The Hereford Mappa, Mundi of 1300, includes depictions of lands and coastlines that official history insists were unknown to Europeans at that time. The Dulcet Portolan of 1339 shows Mediterranean and Atlantic coastlines with accuracy that implies sophisticated surveying techniques and accumulated navigational experience spanning many generations. Chinese cartographic traditions preserve their own geographical mysteries. Ancient Chinese maps depict Pacific islands and coastlines with detail that suggests extensive oceanic exploration during periods when official histories place Chinese civilization focused primarily on continental concerns. The Kangnido map of 1402 shows Africa with reasonable accuracy, despite being created during an era when Chinese-African contact was supposedly minimal. Polynesian navigation traditions provide context for understanding how sophisticated geographical knowledge might have been preserved and transmitted across vast time periods without written records. Traditional Polynesian navigators possess detailed mental maps of Pacific Ocean currents, wind patterns, and island locations that span thousands of square miles of open water. This knowledge is transmitted through oral traditions, star charts, and stick maps that preserve complex geographical information across many generations. The accuracy of ancient Polynesian geographical knowledge rivals modern cartographic standards in many areas. Traditional navigators can pinpoint the locations of distant islands using only observations of wave patterns, bird behavior, and stellar positions. Their mental maps include detailed knowledge of seasonal variations, weather patterns, and oceanic phenomena that require generations of accumulated observation to master. If similar navigation traditions existed during the Ice Age, when lower sea levels created entirely different coastal configurations, they might have preserved geographical knowledge of landscapes that are now submerged or dramatically altered. The maps that puzzle modern historians might represent the fragmentary survival of such ancient knowledge traditions, preserved through oral transmission and occasionally committed to written form by later civilizations. The legends of Lemuria and Mu, continents supposedly lost beneath the Pacific Ocean, take on new significance when considered alongside these cartographic mysteries. While geological evidence disproves the existence of large sunken continents, the lower sea levels of the Ice Age did expose vast areas of continental shelf that are now underwater. Complex island civilizations might have flourished on these exposed lands, developing sophisticated geographical knowledge before rising seas destroyed their territories. Aboriginal Australian mapping traditions demonstrate how geographical knowledge can survive across enormous time periods through oral transmission. Traditional Aboriginal maps encode detailed information about water sources, seasonal phenomena, and territorial boundaries using symbolic systems that have remained consistent for thousands of years. These mental maps cover the entire Australian continent with accuracy that matches modern surveying, despite being maintained without written records. The Bimini Road off the Bahamas, the Yonaguni Monument near Japan, and similar underwater structures around the world might represent physical remains of the civilizations whose geographical knowledge is preserved in these ancient maps. If advanced maritime cultures existed during the Ice Age, their monuments and cities would now lie beneath hundreds of feet of water, accessible only to modern underwater archaeology. Ancient texts from various cultures describe geographical features and travel routes that don't match contemporary landscapes, but might reflect accurate knowledge of much earlier geographical conditions. Plato's description of Atlantis includes detailed geographical information that some researchers have matched to specific underwater topographical features discovered through modern bathymetric mapping. The persistence of certain place names across different cultures and time periods suggests the survival of geographical knowledge from very ancient sources. River names, mountain names, and coastal features often preserve linguistic elements that predate the known history of the regions where they occur, possibly reflecting the geographical vocabulary of much earlier inhabitants. As researchers continue to investigate sites like Gunung Padang and uncover evidence of sophisticated ancient civilizations, these cartographic mysteries gain new relevance. The maps might represent not confused medieval fantasies or lucky guesses, but the fragmentary survival of geographical knowledge accumulated by advanced maritime civilizations that explored the world when its geography was fundamentally different from today. Standing on the terraces of Gunung Padang and contemplating the sophisticated knowledge systems of its builders, one can imagine ancient navigators setting sail from harbors that now lie hundreds of feet beneath the waves, carrying with them charts and knowledge that would eventually filter down through generations to appear as mysterious elements in maps, created by much later civilizations who no longer understood their true origins. In the deepest chambers of human memory, preserved in myths and legends that span every culture on Earth, lie stories of a time when the boundaries between matter and energy were permeable, when sound could move mountains and light could reshape stone. These are not merely poetic metaphors, but possible descriptions of technologies so advanced that later generations could only remember them as magic. The evidence emerging from Gunung Padang suggests that such technologies might not have been mythical at all, but rather the sophisticated engineering capabilities of civilizations whose knowledge has been lost to the great catastrophes that periodically reset human progress. The acoustic properties documented at Gunung Padang provide the first tangible clue to understanding how such sound-based technologies might have functioned. Modern physics recognizes that specific frequencies can create resonance effects in solid materials, temporarily altering their structural properties in ways that could dramatically reduce their effective weight. Acoustic levitation, already demonstrated in modern laboratories with small objects, operates on precisely these principles of frequency-induced resonance. Dr. Gerald Hawkins, the astronomer who decoded Stonehenge's astronomical functions, spent years investigating similar acoustic phenomena at megalithic sites around the world. His research revealed that many ancient stone circles and chambers were designed to produce specific frequency patterns that could induce altered states of consciousness in human listeners. More intriguingly, some sites generated frequencies that matched the resonant characteristics of the stones themselves, suggesting that the ancient builders understood how to use sound to manipulate the physical properties of their construction materials. Local traditions at Gunung Padang describe construction techniques that align remarkably well with modern understanding of acoustic manipulation of matter. The stories tell of builders who would surround massive basalt columns with teams of chanters, their voices combining to produce complex harmonic patterns that made the stones light as feathers. While such descriptions might seem fantastical, they correspond precisely to the theoretical requirements for acoustic levitation of large objects. The mathematical relationships underlying these acoustic phenomena require sophisticated understanding of wave mechanics, harmonic theory, and resonance physics. The builders of Gunung Padang would have needed to understand not just how to produce specific frequencies, but how different frequencies interact with each other and with the molecular structure of various materials. Such knowledge represents a level of scientific understanding that mainstream archaeology doesn't attribute to prehistoric peoples. Recent experiments with cymatics, the study of visible sound patterns, reveal how specific frequencies can create complex geometric arrangements in granular materials. When sand or water is subjected to precise acoustic stimulation, it spontaneously organizes into intricate patterns that match many of the geometric relationships found in ancient megalithic architecture. The builders of Gunung Padang might have used similar principles to guide the placement of their stones according to naturally occurring acoustic patterns. The integration of light-based technologies with sound manipulation appears in legends from cultures around the world. Egyptian texts describe the use of crystalline devices that could focus and amplify solar energy for construction purposes. Mayan traditions speak of architects who worked with living light that could soften stone and reshape matter according to conscious intention. Tibetan oral traditions preserve memories of sound and light technologies that could accomplish construction feats impossible with conventional tools. Modern research into the relationship between electromagnetic fields and gravitational effects suggests possible scientific foundations for such legendary technologies. Certain electromagnetic frequencies, appear to influence gravitational attraction at the quantum level, creating effects that might be amplified through resonance to produce macroscopic changes in the weight and structural properties of large objects. The builders of Gunung Padang might have discovered principles of physics that modern science is only beginning to understand. The crystalline structures found at many ancient sites, including traces detected at Gunung Padang through ground-penetrating radar, might represent components of sophisticated energy manipulation systems. Crystals possess natural piezoelectric properties that allow them to convert mechanical pressure into electrical energy and vice versa. Large crystalline arrays could theoretically function as transducers, converting acoustic energy into electromagnetic fields with sufficient intensity to influence the molecular bonds that determine material properties. The astronomical alignments built into Gunung Padang's design might represent more than symbolic or ceremonial functions. Specific celestial configurations create optimal conditions for various electromagnetic phenomena. As amateur radio operators well know from their experience with ionospheric propagation, the ancient builders might have timed their construction activities to coincide with astronomical events that enhance the effectiveness of their sound and light technologies. Water plays a crucial role in many of these theoretical technologies, as it possesses unique acoustic and electromagnetic properties that could serve as a medium for energy transmission and amplification. The sophisticated water management systems evident at Gunung Padang might represent more than simple drainage and erosion control. The precisely engineered channels and reservoirs might have functioned as components of acoustic and electromagnetic systems that enhanced the site's technological capabilities. The global distribution of sites with similar acoustic and electromagnetic anomalies suggests either widespread cultural transmission of these technologies or their independent rediscovery by multiple civilizations. Newgrange in Ireland, the temples of Malta, the pyramids of Egypt, and the stone circles of Britain all demonstrate sophisticated understanding of sound and light phenomena that appears to serve functions beyond mere aesthetics or simple acoustic enhancement. Modern attempts to replicate the construction techniques evident in megalithic sites consistently fail to achieve the precision and efficiency demonstrated by ancient builders. Contemporary engineers, working with the most advanced equipment available, cannot duplicate the acoustic properties of ancient stone chambers or achieve the mathematical precision evident in their astronomical alignments. This suggests that the original builders possessed not just different techniques, but fundamentally different scientific understanding. The suppression of alternative energy research in modern times might parallel the loss of ancient energy technologies through historical catastrophes. Many promising lines of research into acoustic manipulation, electromagnetic propulsion, and crystalline energy systems have been abandoned or classified due to their potential military applications. The technologies that built Gunung Padang might have been deliberately concealed or gradually forgotten as civilizations fell and knowledge traditions were disrupted. The relationship between consciousness and physical reality, now being explored through quantum physics research, might provide another key to understanding ancient technologies. If consciousness can influence matter at the quantum level, as some experiments suggest, then the combination of focused mental intention with sophisticated acoustic and electromagnetic technologies might produce effects that seem impossible from a purely mechanical perspective. Traditional healing systems from around the world preserve practical applications of sound and light technologies that might represent degraded remnants of much more sophisticated ancient capabilities. Tibetan singing bowls, crystal healing practices, and sound therapy techniques all employ principles that could theoretically be amplified to produce large-scale physical effects similar to those described in ancient construction legends. As researchers continue to investigate the mysteries of Gunung Padang and similar sites around the world, they encounter evidence of technological capabilities that challenge fundamental assumptions about human development. The engineering achievements of these ancient builders might represent not primitive fumbling toward civilization, but sophisticated applications of scientific principles that our current technological paradigm has forgotten how to access. Standing among the resonant stones of Gunung Padang, as the tropical sun illuminates their precisely carved surfaces, one can almost hear the echoes of those ancient voices raised in harmonic chanting, almost see the interplay of light and shadow that might have activated technologies capable of moving mountains. The hill keeps its secrets well, but the stones themselves continue to sing with frequencies that whisper of capabilities far more extraordinary than conventional archaeology dares to imagine. The word pyramid carries with it the weight of ancient Egypt, the grandeur of Giza, and the comfortable certainty of established chronologies that place the earliest monumental architecture safely within the boundaries of recorded history. But as researchers delve deeper into the mysteries of Gunung Padang, they encounter something that challenges not just our understanding of when pyramids were built, but what pyramids actually are and what purposes they might have served for their mysterious creators. From the air, Gunung Padang's pyramidal nature becomes unmistakable. The hill rises in 5 distinct terraces, each level smaller than the one below, creating the classic stepped profile that defines pyramid architecture around the world. But unlike the geometric precision of Egyptian pyramids, which impose mathematical order upon the landscape, Gunung Padang seems to grow organically from the natural topography, as if its builders worked in partnership with geological forces rather than dominating them. Ground-penetrating radar reveals that this organic integration extends deep into the hill's interior. The subsurface structures follow the natural contours of the underlying geology, while simultaneously creating artificial chambers and passages that appear deliberately engineered. The builders seem to have understood the hill as a living system, working with its natural energies and structural properties, rather than simply imposing their architectural vision upon passive materials. The implications of this approach to pyramid construction are staggering. Rather than representing humanity's early attempts at monumental building, Gunung Padang might demonstrate a level of geological and engineering sophistication that surpasses our modern capabilities. The integration of natural and artificial elements requires understanding of forces and systems that contemporary architecture typically treats as separate domains. If the controversial dating is accurate, Gunung Padang predates the Egyptian pyramids by over 20 millennia, fundamentally altering our understanding of pyramid development as an architectural tradition. Rather than representing gradual evolution from simple to complex, the global pyramid tradition might reflect the worldwide distribution of knowledge systems preserved from much earlier, more sophisticated civilizations. The acoustic properties that permeate Gunung Padang's structure suggest that this pyramid served functions entirely different from the burial monuments typically associated with pyramid architecture. The resonant frequencies generated by the stone arrangements, the harmonic relationships between different sections of the structure, and the acoustic focusing effects created by the terrace design all point to purposes involving sound, vibration, and possibly consciousness manipulation. Some researchers propose that Gunung Padang functioned as a kind of acoustic machine designed to generate specific frequency patterns that could influence human consciousness, facilitate communication across vast distances, or even manipulate the physical properties of matter through resonance effects. Such applications would require understanding of physics and consciousness that extends far beyond anything attributed to prehistoric peoples by mainstream archaeology. The astronomical alignments built into Gunung Padang's design add another layer of sophistication that challenges conventional understanding of pyramid functions. While Egyptian pyramids incorporate stellar alignments primarily for symbolic or religious purposes, Gunung Padang appears designed as a functional astronomical instrument, capable of tracking complex celestial cycles and possibly predicting astronomical events with mathematical precision. The water management systems integrated throughout the structure suggest that Gunung Padang's builders understood hydrology as an essential component of pyramid function rather than merely a practical necessity for construction. The precisely engineered drainage channels, retention basins, and flow control mechanisms appear designed to work with the site's acoustic and astronomical properties, creating an integrated technological system that operates on multiple levels simultaneously. Local oral traditions describe Gunung Padang not as a tomb or temple in the conventional sense, but as a kind of beacon or communication device capable of connecting with similar structures around the ancient world. The stories speak of a global network of pyramid sites that could exchange information across oceanic distances using technologies based on acoustic resonance and electromagnetic phenomena. Modern analysis of the construction materials reveals another level of sophistication that distinguishes Gunung Padang from other pyramid sites. The builders appear to have selected and modified stones based on their specific acoustic and electromagnetic properties rather than simply using whatever materials were locally available. This suggests systematic understanding of material science that allowed them to optimize their structure's technological capabilities. The mathematical relationships embedded in Gunung Padang's size and proportions and alignments demonstrate knowledge of advanced geometric principles that appear in pyramid sites around the world. The golden ratio, pi, and other fundamental mathematical constants appear in the site's measurements with precision that suggests not accidental occurrence but deliberate incorporation of cosmic mathematical principles into physical architecture. The question of Gunung Padang's original purpose becomes even more intriguing when considered alongside evidence from other ancient pyramid sites that show similar technological sophistication. The Great Pyramid of Giza generates measurable electromagnetic fields. The pyramids of Teotihuacan show evidence of acoustic engineering, and the pyramid complexes of China incorporate sophisticated astronomical alignments that serve functions beyond simple calendar keeping. Rather than representing independent inventions by separate cultures, the global pyramid tradition might reflect the worldwide distribution of a single highly advanced technological system developed by Ice Age civilizations and subsequently adapted by later cultures according to their reduced capabilities and altered understanding. Each pyramid site might represent a local implementation of universal principles that once formed a coherent global technology network. The preservation of Gunung Padang across such vast time periods speaks to engineering principles that prioritize longevity and stability over immediate functionality. The builders appear to have designed their pyramid to survive not just normal weathering and geological activity, but the kind of catastrophic environmental changes that could destroy entire civilizations. This suggests they possessed knowledge of cyclical catastrophes and deliberately built their monument to preserve essential information across such disasters. The organic architecture that characterizes Gunung Padang might represent a completely different approach to pyramid construction that worked with natural forces rather than attempting to dominate them. Such bioarchitecture requires understanding of living systems, energy flows, and ecological relationships that modern engineering typically ignores in favor of purely mechanical approaches to construction problems. As researchers continue to probe the depths of Gunung Padang's mysteries, they encounter evidence that this pyramid represents not a crude early attempt at monumental architecture, but possibly the most sophisticated example of pyramid technology ever created. Its integration of acoustic, astronomical, geological, and consciousness-related functions suggests technological capabilities that transcend anything achieved by later pyramid builders around the world. The hill that seemed so modest from a distance reveals itself as a monument to human capabilities that challenge every assumption about our species' developmental history. Older than memory, more sophisticated than imagination, Gunung Padang stands as testament to the possibility that our ancestors achieved technological integration with natural forces that our mechanistic civilization has forgotten how to access. Standing on the ancient terraces as the sun sets over landscapes that have changed dramatically since the pyramid's construction, one confronts the humbling possibility that this monument represents not the beginning of human architectural achievement, but perhaps its ultimate expression, a technology so advanced that later civilizations could only remember it as magic, so integrated with natural forces that it appears to be part of the landscape itself. The halls of academic institutions that have shaped archaeological orthodoxy for over a century echo with more than the footsteps of scholars pursuing knowledge. They resonate with the weight of careers built on established paradigms, funding structures that reward conformity to accepted frameworks, and institutional hierarchies that resist challenges to fundamental assumptions with the fierce protectiveness of any established order defending its territory. When Dr. Danny Hillman Nadawisha first presented his evidence for Gunung Padang's extreme antiquity to international archaeological conferences, he encountered responses that revealed the political dimensions underlying supposedly objective scientific inquiry. Senior archaeologists dismissed his findings not primarily on methodological grounds, but because the implications challenged theoretical frameworks that formed the foundation of entire academic careers. The peer review process, supposedly designed to maintain scientific standards, becomes a mechanism for enforcing orthodoxy when controversial discoveries threaten established chronologies. Papers presenting evidence for advanced Ice Age civilizations face reviewers who approach the material with predetermined conclusions about what is possible and what must be rejected regardless of the quality of evidence presented. Dr. Robert Schoch experienced similar resistance when his geological analysis of the Sphinx suggested water erosion dating to periods thousands of years earlier than Egyptologists would accept. Despite his impeccable credentials as a geologist and the clear physical evidence of water weathering patterns, his conclusions were rejected, not because his geology was flawed, but because they contradicted archaeological assumptions about the development of Egyptian civilization. The financial structures that support archaeological research create additional pressures toward conformity. Grant applications must appeal to review panels composed of established researchers whose careers are invested in orthodox interpretations. Proposals that challenge fundamental chronologies or suggest revolutionary discoveries face skepticism that extends beyond scientific methodology to concerns about professional credibility and institutional reputation. University departments that have built their reputations on expertise in specific areas of archaeological interpretation face existential challenges when discoveries like Gunung Padang suggest that their areas of specialization might be based on incomplete or incorrect foundations. Professors who have spent decades developing theories about human development during the Ice Age cannot easily accommodate evidence that their fundamental assumptions might be wrong. The publication process in academic journals reflects these same institutional biases. Editorial boards typically consist of senior researchers whose careers are invested in orthodox interpretations. Revolutionary papers face reviews by experts who have professional reasons for rejecting conclusions that might undermine their own published work and theoretical frameworks. Professional conferences become battlegrounds where evidence is evaluated not solely on its scientific merits, but on its compatibility with established academic territories. Researchers presenting controversial findings often face hostile questioning that focuses more on protecting orthodox interpretations than on evaluating new evidence with appropriate scientific skepticism. The mainstream media adds another layer of complexity to the politics surrounding controversial archaeological discoveries. Journalists seeking sensational stories often present evidence in ways that make serious researchers appear to be promoting fringe theories or ancient alien hypotheses. This media treatment makes academic researchers even more reluctant to associate themselves with controversial discoveries. National pride and cultural politics also influence how archaeological discoveries are interpreted and presented. Indonesian officials enthusiastically embraced Nadawisha's findings about Gunung Padang because they suggested that their nation hosted the world's oldest pyramid. International researchers, however, approached the same evidence with skepticism that sometimes reflected concerns about Indonesian scientific capabilities rather than objective evaluation of the data. The colonial legacy in archaeology creates additional political dimensions that influence how discoveries in former colonies are evaluated by international academic communities. Western archaeologists often approach findings from developing nations with assumptions about local scientific capabilities and methodological standards that reflect cultural biases rather than objective assessment of research quality. Funding sources introduce their own political considerations into archaeological research. Government agencies, private foundations, and corporate sponsors all have interests that can influence which research projects receive support and how findings are interpreted and presented to various audiences. The career pressures facing younger researchers create particularly strong incentives to conform to orthodox interpretations. Graduate students and junior faculty members cannot afford to associate themselves with controversial theories that might damage their prospects for tenure, promotion, or future funding. The academic system systematically discourages the kind of intellectual risk-taking that revolutionary discoveries require. International academic politics add another dimension to the resistance facing controversial archaeological findings. Established research institutions in Europe and North America often dismiss discoveries from other regions that challenge Western assumptions about human development and the origins of civilization. The specialization that characterizes modern academic disciplines creates additional barriers to revolutionary archaeological discoveries. Evidence that requires interdisciplinary interpretation faces review by specialists who may lack the breadth of knowledge necessary to evaluate complex, multifaceted discoveries like Gunung Padang. Legal and regulatory frameworks governing archaeological research often favor established institutions and orthodox methodologies over innovative approaches that might yield revolutionary discoveries. Permits, excavation rights, and access to sites are typically controlled by academic establishments that have institutional interests in maintaining orthodox interpretations. The training of archaeologists within orthodox frameworks creates cognitive biases that make it difficult for researchers to recognize or properly interpret evidence that challenges their fundamental assumptions. Students learn to see the archaeological record through theoretical lenses that filter out anomalous data that doesn't fit established patterns. Museum exhibitions and educational materials reflect and reinforce orthodox archaeological interpretations, creating public expectations that make it difficult for controversial discoveries to receive fair consideration. The general public learns to expect archaeological discoveries that confirm rather than challenge established historical narratives. Despite these institutional pressures, individual researchers like Nadawijaya continue to pursue controversial investigations because the evidence demands honest scientific inquiry regardless of its political implications. Their willingness to risk professional consequences in pursuit of truth represents the best traditions of scientific exploration. The resistance to discoveries like Gunung Padang ultimately reflects the conservative nature of institutional science, which prioritizes stability and consensus over revolutionary change. While such conservatism serves important functions in maintaining scientific standards, it can also become an obstacle to the paradigm shifts that occasionally become necessary as new evidence accumulates. As evidence for advanced ancient civilizations continues to mount from sites around the world, the political barriers that have protected orthodox chronologies are beginning to crumble. The truth has a way of emerging eventually, regardless of the institutional interests that might prefer it to remain hidden. The stones of Gunung Padang care nothing for academic politics or professional careers. They continue to yield evidence that challenges orthodox interpretations with the same patient persistence that has characterized their existence across millennia. The truth they contain will eventually overcome the human politics that have temporarily obscured it. In the village of Karyamukti, where the shadow of Gunung Padang falls across rice paddies that have fed local families for generations, lived a man named Yarrow Darsono, whose dreams had been visited by visions of the hidden chambers since childhood. As the village Stukin, a traditional healer and spiritual intermediary, his unusual dreams were respected rather than dismissed, but they remained simply part of a mysterious landscape of rural spiritual life until modern science arrived with instruments capable of seeing beneath the earth. Yarrow's dreams always followed the same pattern. He would find himself walking through the familiar terraces of Gunung Padang, but in his visions, the stone columns glowed with a soft inner light, and passages opened in the hillside that led to vast chambers filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with rhythmic energy. In these underground spaces, figures in flowing robes moved with purposeful grace among devices that seemed to blend technology with living crystal. Their activities focused on maintaining some kind of cosmic harmony that connected the hill with forces spanning the heavens. The dream chambers contained libraries of crystalline tablets that stored knowledge and patterns of light and sound rather than written words. When Yarrow approached these repositories in his visions, information would flow directly into his consciousness. Complex understanding about the relationship between earth energies and celestial movements, techniques for healing that worked with vibrational frequencies, and most persistently detailed knowledge about hidden spaces within Gunung Padang that corresponded to no visible features of the actual hill. For 30 years, from his first calling as a young man to his maturity as the village's most respected spiritual healer, Yarrow had experienced these dreams with growing clarity and detail. He could navigate the underground passages as easily as the familiar paths around his home, describe the locations of specific chambers and their purposes, and even identify the resonant frequencies that activated different areas of the hidden complex. Village tradition held that shamanic dreams often revealed truths that ordinary perception could not access. Yarrow's father and grandfather had been dukuns before him, and they had passed down oral traditions about Gunung Padang that spoke of hidden chambers, ancient guardians, and knowledge waiting to be rediscovered when the proper time arrived. But Yarrow's dreams contained levels of specific detail that went far beyond traditional stories, as if he were actually visiting these spaces during his sleep. When word reached the village that scientists would be conducting surveys of Gunung Padang using sophisticated underground scanning equipment, Yarrow felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. His dreams had prepared him for this moment, but he wasn't certain whether the modern world would be ready for what the instruments might discover beneath the deceptively simple terraces. Dr. Neda Wija and his research team approached Yarrow with the respectful curiosity that experienced fieldworkers learn to maintain when dealing with local traditional knowledge. Indigenous peoples around the world often possess accurate information about archaeological sites that can guide scientific investigation, and the researchers had learned to listen carefully to such sources regardless of their methods for obtaining knowledge. Yarrow described his dream chambers with precise detail, indicating specific locations or underground passages should emerge from the hillside, the approximate depths at which major chambers would be found, and even the acoustic properties that different underground spaces should exhibit when sound waves penetrated them. His descriptions sounded fantastical, but they were detailed enough to provide specific targets for the ground-penetrating radar surveys. When the first radar scans confirmed the existence of large underground voids in exactly the locations Yarrow had specified, the research team was forced to confront possibilities that challenged their conventional understanding of how information about hidden archaeological features could be obtained. Either Yarrow possessed some form of extrasensory perception that allowed him to accurately detect subsurface structures, or his dreams were accessing information from sources unknown to modern science. Subsequent surveys confirmed additional details from Yarrow's visions with unsettling accuracy. The underground chambers appeared to exist in the configurations he had described, connected by passages that followed the routes he had mapped in his dreams. The acoustic properties of the hidden spaces matched his descriptions of how sounds would resonate within them. Most remarkably, the crystalline structures he had seen in his visions corresponded to geological anomalies detected by the scanning equipment. As the research progressed and more sophisticated instruments were brought to the site, Yarrow found his dreams becoming even more vivid and detailed. It was as if the scientific investigation was somehow activating dormant aspects of the underground complex, awakening systems that had slept for millennia and allowing him to perceive their reactivation through his dreams. The researchers began to consult Yarrow regularly, using his dream knowledge to guide their investigations into the most promising areas for detailed study. His ability to predict where scanning equipment would find significant anomalies proved remarkably reliable, leading to discoveries that might otherwise have taken years of systematic survey to locate. Local villagers watched this collaboration between traditional spiritual knowledge and modern scientific methods with fascination and approval. In their worldview, the convergence made perfect sense. The ancestors who built Gunung Padang had chosen Yarrow as their messenger, providing him with information that would guide the rediscovery of their hidden legacy when the time was appropriate. International researchers arriving at the site were more skeptical of Yarrow's contributions, preferring to rely on conventional methodologies rather than what they considered superstition and wishful thinking. But even the most hardened skeptics had to acknowledge that his information consistently proved accurate, regardless of their theories about how he obtained it. As publicity about Gunung Padang's discoveries spread throughout Indonesia and beyond, Yarrow found himself transformed from a village healer into a figure of national and international interest. Journalists sought him out for interviews about his dreams. Researchers requested his assistance with investigations at other sites, and spiritual seekers arrived, hoping to learn techniques for accessing similar visionary experiences. Despite the attention, Yarrow remained focused on his original purpose as a healer and spiritual guide for his community. The dreams had given him information about Gunung Padang, not for personal fame or financial gain, but to serve as a bridge between the ancient knowledge preserved within the hill and the modern world as rediscovery of that knowledge. The collaboration between Yarrow's visionary knowledge and scientific investigation continues to yield discoveries that neither approach could achieve independently. His dreams provide targets for investigation, while scientific instruments confirm and elaborate on the information received through traditional spiritual methods. As evening approaches and Yarrow prepares for another night of dreams that may reveal new secrets about the ancient chambers, he reflects on the strange turns that life can take. A village healer's visions have become an essential component of one of archaeology's most controversial investigations, bridging the gap between ancient wisdom and modern science in ways that honor both traditions, while transcending the limitations of either approach alone. The dreams continue carrying messages from the builders of Gunung Padang across millennia of time, waiting for the moment when humanity will be ready to rediscover the full scope of knowledge that lies hidden within the hill as carefully constructed chambers. 28,000 years ago, the world's oceans told a different story than they do today. Sea levels lay nearly 400 feet lower than their current position, exposing vast continental shelves that are now hidden beneath hundreds of feet of water. The Indonesian archipelago formed part of a massive landmass called Sundaland, connecting what are now separate islands into a single continental expanse, larger than modern India, stretching from the Malay Peninsula through Java, Sumatra, and Borneo in an unbroken terrestrial empire. In this vanished world, Gunung Padang would not have been an isolated hill rising from a modest agricultural landscape, but a prominent landmark visible across a vast plain that extended hundreds of miles in every direction. Rivers that now flow into separate seas would have been tributaries of mighty continental waterways. Coastlines would have stretched far beyond their modern boundaries, creating harbors and anchorages in locations that are now deep underwater. If the controversial dating of Gunung Padang is accurate, its builders lived in this expanded world of exposed continental shelves, with access to territories and resources that subsequent sea level rise has placed forever beyond our reach. The sophisticated maritime capabilities suggested by their advanced knowledge and possible global connections, would have operated in a geographical context completely different from anything we can observe today. Bathymetric mapping of the Java Sea reveals the submerged topography of this lost landscape. Where modern maps show only water, sonar detection reveals river valleys, coastal plains, and elevated areas that would have provided ideal locations for ancient settlements and cities. The Sunda Shelf contains thousands of square miles of submerged territory that could have supported advanced civilizations whose remains now lie beyond conventional archaeological investigation. Recent underwater discoveries add substance to speculation about what might lie beneath the risen seas. The Yanaguni Monument off the coast of Japan, massive geometric structures detected near the Indian coastline, and sonar anomalies discovered on continental shelves around the world all suggest that significant archaeological sites await discovery beneath the oceans. These submerged structures might represent the remains of the maritime civilizations that built sites like Gunung Padang during periods of lower sea level. The implications for understanding Gunung Padang's builders are profound. Rather than representing an isolated achievement by a small highland community, the pyramid might have been part of a vast network of similar sites, connected by maritime routes that span the exposed continental shelves of the Ice Age world. The sophisticated astronomical alignments and acoustic properties documented at Gunung Padang might represent standardized technologies developed by a maritime civilization that operated across oceanic distances. Genetic research supports the existence of sophisticated seafaring populations during the final phases of the Ice Age. DNA studies reveal complex migration patterns and cultural exchanges that required advanced navigation capabilities and seaworthy vessels capable of long-distance oceanic travel. These populations possessed the maritime technologies necessary to establish and maintain contact between widely separated sites like Gunung Padang and similar monuments on other continents. The speed and extent of sea level rise at the end of the Ice Age would have created catastrophic conditions for any civilizations based on the exposed continental shelves. Meltwater pulses from collapsing ice sheets could raise global sea levels by dozens of feet within a few centuries, inundating vast territories and forcing massive population movements. Coastal cities and harbors would have been abandoned or destroyed, leaving only highland sites like Gunung Padang to preserve evidence of their builders' capabilities. Local oral traditions from around the Indonesian archipelago preserve memories of when the islands were connected and great cities existed in areas that are now beneath the waves. Javanese legends speak of the kingdom of Majapahit extending far beyond its historically documented boundaries, encompassing territories that are now submerged. Similar stories from Sumatra, Borneo, and other islands describe ancestral lands that were swallowed by rising seas, forcing survivors to take refuge in highland areas. The Batak people of northern Sumatra possess particularly detailed oral traditions about the great flood that separated the islands and destroyed the ancient homeland. Their stories describe a time when people could walk from Sumatra to Java without crossing water, when great cities existed in areas that are now part of the Java Sea, and when the ancestors possessed technologies that allowed them to predict the coming inundation and prepare accordingly. Archaeological evidence from the exposed portions of the Sunda Shelf, though limited, supports the possibility of advanced ancient civilizations in this region. Stone tools and other artifacts recovered from depths that correspond to Ice Age sea levels show sophisticated manufacturing techniques and suggest organized settlement patterns. These surface finds might represent only the most resistant remnants of much more extensive cultural remains. The acoustic properties that make Gunung Padang unique among archaeological sites take on new significance when considered as part of a maritime communication network. Sound travels much more effectively across water than across land, and the specific frequencies generated by Gunung Padang's stone arrangements could theoretically carry across vast distances over the calm seas of protected continental shelf regions. If Gunung Padang functioned as part of an acoustic communication system, similar sites should exist at other strategic locations around the ancient Sundaland continent. Some researchers have identified possible candidate sites on other Indonesian islands that show similar acoustic properties and geometric arrangements, suggesting the remnants of a coordinated network of communication beacons. The astronomical alignments built into Gunung Padang's design would have been essential for navigation across the vast distances of the expanded Ice Age world. Maritime civilizations require sophisticated knowledge of celestial mechanics for accurate navigation, and the mathematical precision evident at Gunung Padang demonstrates exactly the kind of astronomical expertise that would have been necessary for coordinating activities across oceanic distances. Modern attempts to locate submerged archaeological sites face enormous technical and financial challenges. The areas of greatest interest lie beneath hundreds of feet of water and thousands of years of marine sediment accumulation. Conventional archaeological techniques cannot be applied to underwater investigations, requiring specialized equipment and methodologies that make such research extremely expensive and technically demanding. Despite these challenges, underwater archaeological investigations have already yielded tantalizing glimpses of what might await discovery beneath the risen seas. Sonar surveys have detected geometric formations on the sea floor that appear too regular and organized to be natural geological features. Side-scan sonar has revealed what appear to be stone constructions in locations that would have been coastal areas during the Ice Age. The possibility that advanced maritime civilizations operated across the exposed continental shelves of the Ice Age world provides a framework for understanding not just Gunung Padang, but the global distribution of megalithic sites that challenge conventional chronologies. Rather than representing independent inventions by separate cultures, these sites might represent the surviving highland remnants of a connected technological civilization that was largely destroyed by post-glacial sea level rise. Climate research confirms that the transition from Ice Age to modern conditions involved not gradual change, but rapid, catastrophic shifts that would have been devastating for coastal civilizations. Meltwater pulse events could raise sea levels by dozens of feet within decades, creating conditions that would have forced massive population movements and cultural disruption on a global scale. As researchers continue to investigate Gunung Padang and similar sites around the world, they must grapple with the possibility that the most important evidence for understanding human civilization has true antiquity and sophistication may lie not in accessible terrestrial locations but beneath hundreds of feet of seawater on the world's continental shelves. The pyramid on the hill may be merely the visible remnant of a much larger story that remains hidden beneath the waves. Standing on Gunung Padang's terraces and looking out across the landscape toward the Java Sea, one can almost visualize the vast continental plain that once extended to horizons far beyond the current coastline. In that expanded world, the hill would have commanded views across territories where great cities might have flourished, connected by trade routes and communication networks whose sophistication we are only beginning to imagine. The sea keeps its secrets well, but the stones of Gunung Padang continue to hint at wonders that await rediscovery beneath the waves. In the geological record of our planet, written in layers of stone and ice that preserve the story of Earth's climatic history, researchers have discovered evidence of catastrophes so severe that they reshaped not just the physical landscape, but the entire trajectory of life itself. These are not the gradual changes that evolution typically accommodates, but sudden, violent disruptions that can eliminate species, destroy ecosystems, and fundamentally alter the conditions that support complex civilizations. The Younger Dryas, that mysterious return to glacial conditions that occurred between 12,900 and 11,700 years ago, represents one such catastrophe whose effects would have been devastating for any advanced civilizations that existed at the time. Within a matter of decades, global temperatures plummeted, ice sheets advanced across continents, and sea levels fluctuated wildly, as massive freshwater lakes burst through ice dams and poured into the oceans, disrupting global circulation patterns. If Gunung Padang truly dates to 28,000 years ago, its builders would have lived through not just this catastrophe, but potentially several similar events that mark the chaotic final phases of the Ice Age. The survival of their monument through such tumultuous periods speaks to engineering principles that prioritized long-term stability and resistance to environmental disasters on a scale that modern civilization has never experienced. Recent research has identified possible cosmic causes for some of these ancient catastrophes. Evidence for asteroid or comet impacts around 12,900 years ago includes widespread deposits of nanodiamonds, magnetic microspherules, and other exotic materials that typically result from extraterrestrial impacts. Such events would have triggered not just climate change, but global wildfires, tsunamis, and atmospheric disruption that could destroy entire civilizations within a matter of hours or days. The mythology of cultures around the world preserves memories of exactly such catastrophes, stories of fire from the sky, worldwide floods, and the destruction of advanced civilizations by natural forces beyond human control. These myths consistently describe survivors of the catastrophes carrying knowledge and technologies from the destroyed civilizations into a new world where they became the founders of later cultures and the teachers of essential skills. Hindu cosmology describes cycles of creation and destruction that operate on vast time scales, with advanced civilizations rising and falling repeatedly as cosmic forces periodically reset the conditions for life on Earth. The Kali Yuga, or Age of Darkness, is described as a period when advanced knowledge is lost and humanity must gradually rediscover capabilities that were once common, but were destroyed during the transition between cosmic cycles. Norse mythology tells of Ragnarok, a time when the world burns and the gods themselves perish, followed by a renewal period when survivors emerge from hidden refuges to rebuild civilization in a transformed world. Similar themes appear in Aztec legends of multiple previous worlds destroyed by different catastrophic forces, with each destruction followed by the emergence of new civilizations built by survivors carrying knowledge from the previous world. The biblical account of Noah's flood, paralleled by similar flood stories from cultures around the world, might preserve memories of the massive flooding that occurred at the end of the Ice Age, when rising sea levels inundated vast continental shelf areas that had supported human populations. These stories consistently describe warnings received by the survivors, advanced preparation for the coming catastrophe, and the preservation of essential knowledge and skills through the disaster. Archaeological evidence supports the possibility that some sites were deliberately designed to survive catastrophic events. The massive stone construction of megalithic monuments, their integration with natural geological features, and their positioning in elevated locations all suggest builders who understood and prepared for environmental disasters on a scale that exceeds anything in recorded history. Gunung Padang's sophisticated water management systems, earthquake-resistant construction, and integration with natural geological features all indicate builders who possessed detailed knowledge of catastrophic environmental changes and engineered their monument to survive such events. The site appears designed not just for normal use, but for preservation through periods of severe environmental stress. The global distribution of similar sites suggests that such catastrophe-resistant construction might have been a standard feature of Ice Age civilizations. From Göbekli Tepe in Turkey to Sacsayhuaman in Peru, megalithic sites around the world demonstrate construction techniques that prioritize durability and stability over convenience or aesthetic considerations. The builders of these monuments appear to have understood that civilizations are temporary, but knowledge can be permanent if properly preserved in durable forms. The astronomical alignments, mathematical relationships, and technological principles built into sites like Gunung Padang might represent attempts to encode essential information in forms that could survive the periodic catastrophes that destroy human societies. Local traditions around Gunung Padang preserve memories of the site as function as a refuge during times of great earth changes. The stories describe hidden chambers stocked with supplies, underground water sources that remain pure during surface contamination, and acoustic systems that could maintain communication with other survivor populations during periods when normal transportation networks were disrupted. The acoustic properties of Gunung Padang take on new significance when considered as survival technologies. The ability to generate sounds that carry across vast distances would have been essential for coordinating survivor populations scattered across a post-catastrophe landscape where normal communication infrastructures had been destroyed. The astronomical knowledge preserved in Gunung Padang S alignments might represent essential information for re-establishing agricultural cycles and navigation systems in a world where normal seasonal patterns had been disrupted by environmental catastrophe. The builders appear to have understood that survivors would need reliable methods for tracking time and celestial movements to rebuild civilization after the destruction of their original cultural contexts. Genetic research reveals that human populations went through severe bottlenecks during the final phases of the Ice Age, with effective population sizes dropping to levels that suggest near-extinction events. The rapid population growth and cultural development that occurred after these bottlenecks might reflect the application of preserved knowledge by survivor populations rather than independent invention by primitive peoples. Modern risk assessment for global catastrophes includes many of the same factors that would have threatened Ice Age civilizations, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, climate instabilities, and solar events that could disrupt technological systems and threaten food production on a global scale. Contemporary civilization might be more vulnerable to such events than the dispersed, resilient cultures that built sites like Gunung Padang. The preservation of knowledge through catastrophic periods requires not just durable storage media, but social institutions capable of maintaining continuity across generations of survivors who might face completely altered environmental conditions. The oral traditions, ceremonial practices, and astronomical observations associated with Gunung Padang might represent such knowledge preservation systems. As climate research reveals the possibility of rapid, catastrophic environmental changes in our own era, the engineering principles evident at Gunung Padang become increasingly relevant. The builders' integration of natural and artificial systems, their emphasis on long-term stability, and their preparation for survival through environmental disasters offer lessons that might prove essential for our own civilizations as long-term survival. Standing among the ancient stones as modern instruments detect the sophisticated systems built into their arrangement, one confronts the sobering possibility that Gunung Padang represents not humanity's earliest monument, but perhaps our most successful attempt to preserve civilization through the catastrophic forces that periodically reset human progress. The hill stands as testimony to the resilience of knowledge and the determination of our ancestors to ensure that essential wisdom would survive even the collapse of the worlds that created it. In the intersection between rigorous scientific methodology and the persistent voice of human mythology lies a territory that makes conventional academics uncomfortable, a realm where empirical evidence begins to validate stories that have been dismissed for centuries as primitive, superstition, or cultural fantasy. Gunung Padang stands precisely at this crossroads, challenging researchers to navigate between the demands of scientific skepticism and the accumulating evidence that ancient peoples might have possessed capabilities far beyond what orthodox archaeology has been willing to acknowledge. The scientific method, with its emphasis on reproducible results, peer review, and incremental advancement of knowledge, has served humanity well in understanding the physical world and developing the technologies that define modern civilization. But this same methodological approach encounters fundamental limitations when confronted with evidence that challenges its basic assumptions about what is possible and what ancient peoples could have achieved. Dr. Nadawija's research team approached Gunung Padang with precisely the kind of rigorous methodology that scientific orthodoxy demands. They used multiple independent dating techniques, employed sophisticated instrumental analysis, and submitted their findings for peer review by international experts. Yet the results they obtained, evidence for sophisticated Ice Age construction, contradicted fundamental assumptions about human development that form the foundation of archaeological science. The response from the academic community revealed the inherent conservatism of scientific institutions when confronted with paradigm-challenging discoveries. Rather than engaging with the evidence on its merits, many researchers focused their criticism on methodological details that could potentially invalidate conclusions they found theoretically unacceptable. Local oral traditions, meanwhile, had preserved for millennia precisely the kind of information that scientific investigation was beginning to confirm. Stories of advanced ancient builders, sophisticated construction technologies, and global communication networks seemed to anticipate discoveries that modern instruments were only just beginning to detect beneath the surface of an apparently modest hill. This convergence of mythological narrative and scientific evidence forces a fundamental question. How much of what we have dismissed as folklore and legend might actually preserve accurate historical information about capabilities and events that occurred so long ago that they survive only in the amber of oral tradition? The mythology surrounding Gunung Padang describes builders who possess technologies that seem magical from our contemporary perspective. The ability to move massive stones through acoustic manipulation, to work with crystalline devices that could focus and amplify natural energies, to integrate spiritual and technical knowledge in ways that transcended the boundaries between science and mysticism. Modern physics, particularly in areas like quantum mechanics and consciousness research, has begun to discover phenomena that would have seemed equally magical to previous generations of scientists. The relationship between consciousness and physical reality, the possibility of action at a distance through quantum entanglement, and the discovery that observation can influence the behavior of subatomic particles, all suggest that the boundaries between mind and matter might be more permeable than classical physics assumed. If consciousness can influence physical reality at quantum scales, as some experiments suggest, then the integration of mental focus with acoustic and electromagnetic technologies might theoretically produce effects that would seem impossible from a purely mechanistic perspective. The legends of ancient builders working with sound and light might describe actual technologies based on principles that mainstream science has only recently begun to investigate. The acoustic properties documented at Gunung Padang align remarkably well with modern research into the effects of specific frequencies on human consciousness and material structures. The stone arrangements generate tones that fall within ranges known to induce meditative states, enhance cognitive function, and potentially influence the molecular structure of materials through resonance effects. Cymatics, the study of visible sound patterns, demonstrates how specific frequencies can organize matter into complex, geometric arrangements that match many of the mathematical relationships found in ancient megalithic architecture. If the builders of Gunung Padang understood these principles, they might have used acoustic technologies to guide construction processes in ways that modern engineering is only beginning to appreciate. The astronomical alignments built into Gunung Padang's design demonstrate mathematical knowledge that requires not just careful observation, but theoretical understanding of celestial mechanics and the ability to project astronomical relationships far into the future. Such capabilities suggest cultural institutions for preserving and transmitting complex knowledge that extend far beyond what archaeology typically attributes to hunter-gatherer societies. Local shamanic traditions preserve practical applications of consciousness-altering techniques that might represent degraded remnants of much more sophisticated ancient knowledge systems. The use of specific sound frequencies, crystalline objects, and geometric arrangements to induce altered states of consciousness appears in traditional practices around the world, suggesting common knowledge traditions of considerable antiquity. The challenge for contemporary researchers lies in developing methodologies that can evaluate such possibilities without abandoning the rigorous standards that distinguish scientific inquiry from wishful thinking or cultural bias. This requires expanding the boundaries of what is considered potentially valid while maintaining the critical skepticism essential for reliable knowledge. Interdisciplinary approaches that combine conventional archaeological methods with insights from consciousness research, quantum physics, and traditional knowledge systems might provide frameworks for investigating ancient capabilities that fall outside the scope of any single academic discipline. Such integrated approaches require researchers to work across conventional academic boundaries and synthesize information from multiple sources. The documentation of acoustic and electromagnetic anomalies at Gunung Padang provides quantifiable data that can be analyzed using standard scientific methods, regardless of theoretical assumptions about how such properties might have been achieved. The frequencies, harmonics, and field effects are measurable phenomena that exist independently of speculation about ancient technologies. The mathematical relationships embedded in the site, S proportions and alignments, represent another form of quantifiable evidence that can be evaluated objectively. Whether these relationships resulted from advanced ancient knowledge or fortunate coincidence becomes a question of statistical probability that can be assessed using standard mathematical methods. Genetic and linguistic research provides independent lines of evidence for the sophisticated capabilities of ancient populations. DNA studies reveal complex migration patterns and cultural exchanges that required advanced navigation and communication technologies. Linguistic analysis shows the preservation of technical vocabulary and conceptual frameworks that suggest much more sophisticated knowledge traditions than typically attributed to prehistoric peoples. The convergence of multiple independent lines of evidence, archaeological, geological, acoustic, astronomical, genetic, and mythological, creates a pattern that becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss as coincidence or misinterpretation. While any single piece of evidence might be explained away, the cumulative weight of converging data points toward conclusions that challenge fundamental assumptions about human development. As researchers continue to investigate Gunung Padang and similar sites around the world, they must navigate carefully between premature acceptance of revolutionary claims and reflexive rejection of evidence that challenges orthodox assumptions. The goal should be neither to validate ancient legends nor to defend established paradigms, but to follow the evidence wherever it leads, even if that requires fundamental revision of our understanding of human capabilities and historical development. Standing among the resonant stones as scientific instruments detect sophistication that myths had long proclaimed, one confronts the possibility that the boundary between legend and history might be less clearly defined than academic orthodoxy has assumed. The crossroads where myth and science meet at Gunung Padang might ultimately prove to be not a place of confusion, but a portal to understanding human capabilities that transcend the limitations of any single approach to knowledge. The camera drifts slowly across the Indonesian highlands. Mist curls over the green ridges like ancient breath rising from the earth itself. The hill of Gunung Padang rests quietly, shrouded in silence, as though guarding secrets it has no intention of yielding. For decades, scholars, villagers, and seekers of truth have walked these stones, touched their rough surfaces, and stared at their ordered terraces. Some see nothing more than the play of geology. Others see deliberate hands, chiseling, arranging, shaping. But whatever the truth may be, Gunung Padang refuses to answer in words. It speaks only through stone. Civilization, as we know it, is a story of progress. We trace it back to Mesopotamia, to the invention of writing, to the building of the first cities. This is the narrative that has been passed down in classrooms, museums, and books for generations. And yet, every so often, anomalies appear. Structures that seem too old, myths that sound too precise, legends that echo across continents as if whispered by a forgotten people who once roamed the earth together. Gunung Padang has become one such anomaly. If the evidence is true, if beneath this hill lies a pyramid built 28,000 years ago, then our timeline of human history fractures. It means that long before Egypt's pyramids rose, long before Sumer etched cuneiform into clay, long before agriculture as we understand it, humans may have already achieved monumental feats. But was it truly humans? Or a civilization we no longer recognize? The stones remain unmoved by these questions. They sit in quiet defiance, wearing coats of moss and earth, letting centuries of rain wash over them. Archaeologists with instruments probe their depths. Spiritual seekers meditate upon their terraces. Politicians debate their significance. Yet still, the hill does not surrender its story. Perhaps this is the lesson, that history is not a neat line, but a broken mirror. Fragments glint in different places, hinting at a greater whole we can no longer fully see. Gunung Padang may be one shard of that mirror, sharp, reflective, and dangerous to the established order. Legends from the surrounding land tell of ancestors with powers beyond our imagination, giants who lifted stones with ease, sages who harnessed light and sound. To the mainstream eye, these are myths, allegories meant to explain the unexplainable. But to others, they are memory distorted perhaps, but rooted in real events. It is here, in this blurred space between myth and science, that Gunung Padang lives, neither fully explained nor fully dismissed. Some believe it may be a tomb, holding the remains of kings or priests who lived before the dawn of recorded history. Others see it as a temple, aligned to the heavens, constructed as a bridge between earth and sky. And then there are those who imagine it as something stranger, a machine of stone, built to resonate with the earth's energies, to safeguard knowledge, or to stabilize a world in turmoil. The truth, if ever known, may be none of these or all of them at once. Imagine for a moment the world as it was 28,000 years ago. Glaciers covered much of the north. Vast plains stretched where oceans now roll. Humanity was scattered, small, vulnerable. Yet perhaps, in some corners, there existed a brilliance people who could carve and shape stone, who could read the stars, who could leave behind a message that would outlast them. If so, what became of them? Did they perish in floods, in fire, in shifting skies? Did their knowledge sink beneath the waves of the Sunda Shelf, now lost to the Java Sea? Or did fragments of their wisdom survive, carried in myths, in songs, in symbols that later civilizations would inherit and reinterpret? The silence of Gunung Padang leaves these questions unanswered. And so, we are left to wonder, to ask whether history is smaller than we believe, or far larger. Whether we are the peak of human achievement, or simply another chapter in a very old story. The stones do not say. They wait. The camera pulls back, showing the terraces receding into the green. Birds circle in the sky above. The soundtrack softens flutes, strings, echoes that feel ancient. The narrator's voice grows contemplative. What if the truth of Gunung Padang is stranger than both archaeology and myth? What if it is not just a question of dates, but of memory? A memory too vast for us to hold, stretching back into a darkness we can barely imagine. A memory written not in books, but in hills, stones, and silence. Civilizations rise. Civilizations fall. Most leave only whispers. Perhaps Gunung Padang is one such whisper, louder than most, but still only an echo of builders we cannot name, of dreams we cannot decipher, of a world that ended before ours began. And so the hill remains, draped in mist, enduring storms and seasons. An unfinished story, waiting for the day someone will listen, not just with science, not just with belief, but with humility. Until then, Gunung Padang will keep its secret, and humanity will keep asking the question, what if?